This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Bryan, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Stephenie Meyer really went and capped off her wildly successful YA vampire love story by writing this. Okay, it's Breaking Dawn Part 1, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn, Part 1. We talked about it before, but we're going to be doing directly into our Part 2 next week. We are doing a prequel episode, but it'll come out in the middle. We'll talk about more of that at the end. We also wanted to mention before we get started that if you support us for $5 on Patreon, patreon.com/thisfilmislit, we released an hour and a half long episode talking about Midnight Sun.
We did.
So if you've been here for the Twilight episodes, Katie had so many thoughts about Midnight Sun, and I was there to just ask questions and make terrible jokes. So if you support us for $5 a month on Patreon, you can get access to that and hear everything we thought about Midnight Sun. But that's not what we're talking about right now. Right now, we're talking about Breaking Dawn Part 1. We're going to get into it with our first segment. Let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Let me take a big gulp of wine. The big day for Bella and Edward has finally arrived, but it's marred by Jacob's absence as he has run off to the Canadian wilderness after getting his invitation. The wedding goes off, mostly without a hitch. Bella and Edward leave for the honeymoon on Isle Esme, and while there, have sex while Bella is still human. This most unholy union results in Bella becoming pregnant with a rapidly gestating fetus. Edward and others want to remove the fetus as it's killing Bella, but Bella and Rosalie will not let them. We take a jaunty side excursion with Jacob as he deals with this news about Bella and his lack of a mate. Ultimately, Jacob leaves his pack in order to protect Bella/the fetus from Sam and the others who feel they must kill the fetus in order to protect the town. A tense ceasefire is arrived at, and Bella goes into labor. Bella dies giving birth, but Edward injects venom into her, starting her transformation. Jacob, wildly distraught over Bella's apparent death, decides he'll exact revenge on the baby, Renesmee, for killing Bella, but as he is about to, he imprints on the baby. Bella finishes her transformation, opens her eyes, and begins her new second life as a vampire. The end.
Of part one
of the movie.
of the movie.
It's only halfway through the book.
Halfway through the book, yes. Roughly. All right, that was, let me sum up, if you did not see or had not seen or read any of those things, now you got a little bit of a feel for what what we went through. So hopefully this stuff will make a little bit more sense. Let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about. Better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So we talked about this. This is the thing in the last episode. This is the first thing that jumped out to me. I actually don't have as much better in the book this time because the book's not very good, and we'll talk about it. But I didn't have as much better in the book this time as some of the other ones, and I had a lot more. I don't know, a lot more. I had a few more better in the movie, that sort of thing. But one of the things I mentioned in the Eclipse episode is, and we both talked about, is how ridiculous and stupid it was that they cut the part where after Seth and Edward defeat Victoria, Edward fist bumps Seth's nose. Mm-hmm. And that was made even more stupid in this book as I kept reading. And now the movie doesn't do as much of this. It does a little bit. They mention, but in the book, Seth and Edward have become like friends.
Yeah.
Like actual friends. And I was like, well, if they're going to do that in the movie and have them be like actual friends, it makes even less sense that they would cut out that moment of bonding. That's also just like a super easy, like fun fan service moment.
Fan service that would have still worked for people who weren't like book readers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't need to rehash it.
But anyways.
But yeah, the fact that the movie just moves forward with their friendship does make that decision even dumber.
Yeah. Another thing the movie drops completely, which I thought was interesting choice, and maybe they'll talk about this in the next one, but I don't really know the context yet because I'm only halfway through this book of what this is going towards necessarily, other than it being a potential foreshadowing of Bella's baby, I guess. I don't even know because I don't know. So there's this whole story. Tanya and the Alaskan vampires are coming, and they do show up in the movie at the wedding. But in the book, there's this discussion before they get there. They tell Bella this story, I believe is my memory of how it transpires, about how Bella's mom, or not Bella, sorry, Tanya's mother had created a vampire baby. But it wasn't like, didn't give birth to it. At least that's not the way it's described from my memory. I read this a long time ago.
Yeah, she does a interview with a vampire. They create like a child vampire.
Yeah, and because they're like super strong or something, they're like nicknamed the Immortal Children. But ultimately, the Volturi like stomp this out and they kill Tanya's mom. Mm-hmm. And there's also this thing where Carlisle explains like how. I understand why this was dropped from the movie because it's a lot of like it's not a flashback, but you would probably have to do it as like a flashback, kind of like when they explain like Jasper's backstory and stuff like that. But Carla explains like how people around the children like can't help falling in love with them, and they never found out who this child was or why Tanya's mom had turned to them, but like they all watched the Volturi murder their mother. And this again, I don't know why any of that's important yet. If it because that. As of halfway through the book, that has not made they've not touched on that again, or we've only ever seen Tanya and them at the wedding, and then we don't hear about them ever again in the book. I thought it was an interesting story, and so I expected it to be in the movie in some capacity, and my guess is that maybe it's more relevant for the second half, and so maybe they'll talk about it in the second movie. But it's not in this one, so I had that embedded in the book because I thought it was interesting, but I also get why they dropped it. So
the movie skipped over a lot of stuff from the beginning of the book with both Charlie and Renee, some of which I was grateful for. But one thing that I was kind of sad the movie left out was actually Renee's reaction to Bella getting married, because Bella was anxious to tell her because her mom is like not a big fan of, I guess, marriage in general, but also like getting married young because she got married young and that ended up badly. But as it turns out, they Bella and Renee in the book have this kind of like nice moment where Renee is like, well, yeah, but you're not me.
She's like, it wasn't good for me. Like, I shouldn't have got married young, but you're an old soul.
You're fine. But I thought that was like a nice moment between them and like a really level-headed acknowledgement that you don't often see from parent characters in media, that like, this is fine for you because you're not me. We're not the same.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that.
Another small thing that got left out of the movie was Alice fitting Charlie for his tux for the wedding.
Oh yeah, they did cut a lot of the pre-wedding stuff. Not that there's a whole bunch of it in the book, but
no, there's not. But there is more than there is in the movie. A little bit more. Yeah, the movie kind of jumps right into the wedding, which makes sense. You got a lot of other stuff to kind of get to. That Bella's engagement ring, still hate it. It's tacky, looks horrible.
You get a nice close-up of it as she's walking down the aisle.
Hate it. There was one line from the book, though, that I wanted to bring up, because Renee at one point says something about like the theme of the wedding being around the ring, because it's like a vintage ring and whatever. And then Bella has this line, the wedding wasn't actually centered around the ring, but Edward himself. And I was like, now there's a metaphor for their relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There's a little moment right before she goes to get, like, at the wedding, she's getting ready to, go walk down the aisle and stuff. And at the last minute, Alice lends Bella her garter And there's actually like 2 garter moments that neither make it into the movie that both made me chuckle in the book. But Alice lends her garter and goes, "That's mine, and I want it back." And Bella blushes, and I was like, Stephenie Meyer, every goddamn book, you find a way. You find a way to do it.
She drops little kernels for you.
You figure out a way to do it in every single one of these.
You mentioned earlier that we do see the Alaska vampires at the wedding reception. And in the movie, something happens that's not in the book. The character Irina has kind of a meltdown because we found out in Eclipse, she was shacked up with Laurent for a while and still holds a grudge against the werewolves for killing him.
Yeah.
And that has kind of bled over into like a grudge against Bella, and she's mad about the whole thing. And the movie has her kind of like melt down about it at the reception.
Yeah.
Which I understood, but it felt a little bit random to me.
Yeah, well, they had to do it. So they had to. I think what happened is they should have known all this ahead of time because all these books were out by the time the movies were made. But so they're not in Eclipse. They don't show up at all. They don't even talk about it. Maybe there's like a throwaway line or something about how like they can't come help. But in the book Eclipse, there's this huge discussion of them like, we got to ask them for help, and then they explain in Eclipse they won't come because they're mad about the Laurent thing, or the one of them's mad about the Laurent thing. So this movie felt like they had to be at the wedding,
right?
But in the book, my memory is that she just doesn't come, right, to the wedding.
Yeah, I believe
I think she just doesn't come,
out.
And the rest of them do.
Yeah,
but they needed him at the wedding, and they also had to introduce her character probably for later. And then, but they didn't have the backstory, so they had to kind of shoehorn it in here, and they did it in about as good as you could.
It's fine, and I understand the reasoning for it.
Yeah,
but it does feel like weird and shoehorned.
A little bit, yeah, because it is kind of shoehorned in. They also do this weird thing at the wedding where it feels like, and maybe I'm losing my mind, but I'm probably not, that they're like setting up something between Charlie and Sue Clearwater.
Like 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a moment at the wedding where Charlie says he's going to go get her food or a drink or something. Yeah. And then like Billy has this weird moment.
Billy like glares at him, and then like everybody shares a knowing glance, and I was like, well, this was not in the book.
I felt like the movie was doing a weird like Billy and Charlie are both vying for Sue Clearwater's affections.
I guess that could
like
be.
Billy looks angry.
Yeah.
When Charlie says he's going to get her a drink.
I guess that could be.
And I was like, why a movie? For what purpose?
Maybe they just felt like they needed Charlie to end up with somebody. Like, that's the happy ending here. Like, because he's going to lose Bella, so if he gets at least Sue Clearwater, then he'll feel better. I don't know.
We're doing Shakespearean comedy here. Everyone pairs off at the end.
That's kind of what it seems like. And I was like, or it also is possible that it's in the book, because I haven't finished the book. It's possible that it's in the book at the end, and the movie felt like they needed to like.
It's totally possible that it is. That would definitely be a detail that I do not remember.
Yeah.
I remember, like we mentioned it. I think I read this book once.
Yeah,
I read it when it came out in 2008, and then I never cracked it ever again until now.
Yeah.
So I remember like the major plot beats, but there's a lot in here that I do not remember. So it's totally possible that happens.
Yeah, and like I said, if that does happen in the book later, then maybe this is just a way for the movie to kind of...
Yeah.
Because there's no setup for it in the book. There's no hint of any of that in the first half of the book at the wedding or anything. So we'll see. We shall find out next week.
Let's talk about these wedding speeches.
The wedding speeches. Oh, boy. I originally had the wedding speeches in Better in the Movie.
I was totally on board for it when I thought it was just going to be Emmett being obnoxious and giving like a dude bro best man speech.
I thought we were going to get one little comedy beat of that. That was going to be like Emmett doing an Emmett speech at the wedding. Maybe one other quick little moment, but then it just kept going.
And people who gave speeches made zero sense. That like, why would Jessica be giving a speech?
The reason Jessica gives a speech in this movie is because it's Anna Kendrick.
Well, I understand
I would
that,
be my guess.
But like she's not even in the wedding party.
No.
She's just a guest.
To be fair, nobody's in the wedding party in the movie. There's nobody standing up there. Everybody's sitting
True.
watching.
Yeah.
It's just them up on the...
In the book, we know that Alice is her maid of honor.
Yeah,
and I don't think the book ever says who the best man is, but I would assume Emmett.
Yeah.
But...
Well, Jacob makes a joke about him being the best man.
True.
Yeah, you would assume Emmett probably, or Jasper, I guess. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, none of them are in the movie. None of them are standing up there.
Yeah.
They're all sitting in like the front row.
But so then Jessica gives a speech and Charlie gives like the grossest dad toast. Gun dad. And then Renee sings.
Charlie, it can be such a good character, and then the movies cannot help but reduce him to gun.
Yes.
Violent gun dad, cop.
Yeah.
Gun. Like that, and he has an interesting nuance to him in that the movie does okay sometimes, and the performance is pretty good, but they can't help but go back to that same joke well over and over, and it's so fucking gross. But yeah, Renee sings. Okay, great.
I turned to you during this part, and I was like, "What are we doing right now?"
Yeah.
Because it just goes on forever.
Yeah.
Another garter moment that we missed from the book that I was really hoping would be in the movie was Edward throws the garter directly into Mike's face.
Yes, he does. He also, she also, this is the other moment I meant to talk about, is that when he goes to take it off Bella, she moves it down to her ankle so as to not, like what? Okay. You guys are actually married now. He can touch your thigh. Like, it's fine. It's so weird.
Bella suddenly becomes, like, a little bit prude in this installment.
Yeah.
Like, not a lot.
A little, though.
But a little bit. Like, for someone who was, like, begging for sex in the last couple books.
And I guess there could be an interesting, like, idea to that of, like, now that it's actually... Now, maybe she was pushing before, but she knew all the time that he wouldn't give in, so she felt more comfortable pushing him. Whereas now that it's an actual potential real thing, that like fair, you know what I mean? That could be a change there, where now she's not sure and a little more, you know, because the first time it definitely there's a lot of complicated emotions and, and feelings going on, so I can understand that.
All right, let's fast forward to after the wedding night.
Yes.
Bella's got some bruises from all that vampire sex.
Yep.
Which look ridiculous in the movie.
They're very faint.
They look like little dirt smears. Like she got some dust on her.
Yeah. So I had this in a different spot. I had this in the movie Nailed It, I think, originally, because she does at least end up with bruises. They are much less, not what is described in the book. It is, yes, when you read the book, you're imagining... She looks like she got in like a fight, like a boxing match or something. And it's weird because I hate this whole plot element altogether. That because he's always worried that he's going to hurt her, which the movie downplays a little bit, his fear of hurting her. Like it's a thing he's like super freaked out about in the book and talks about it all the time and is like super against them having sex because of it. And he's like, I could hurt you. And there's a little bit of that in the movie, but it's downplayed. And then in the book, he absolutely she ends up with all these bruises. She doesn't notice them in the same way she does in the movie. It's not what she's thinking about. And they're obviously not so bad that it's like causing her immense pain or anything because she doesn't even realize. But so I had it in the movie Nailed It for including it in that sense. But I also, it doesn't really make sense as much in the movie with Edward's reaction in my head, because he... In the book and the movie, he's like very upset about this and like blames himself and becomes very dejected over it. But in the book, it's a little more believable if she's like covered in big, horrible bruises.
Yeah, it sounds like in the book, it sounds like she's got these like really gnarly, giant bruises all over her body. And in the movie, that translates to like a couple of light-looking bruises
that looked like they could easily have been done by two normal human beings having sex.
Yeah.
totally reasonable.
But he's still like, I'm a monster.
Yeah. And it's just, and I get that plays in his, but so yeah, most importantly, I dislike that whole plot point entirely. That
oh yeah, the whole thing is gross.
The whole thing is gross that she does ultimately get injured and this is like some weird. See, we told you this is what happens when you have sex. It's dangerous. Well, it's and then obviously she also immediately gets pregnant, which we'll talk about, but which are real. It's a real potential outcome. But yeah. She's immediately punished doubly, or punished might be the right word in terms.
The bruises are like a pre-punishment.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, the whole thing is dumb, and it makes no sense. His reaction makes a lot less sense in the movie because they're so mild. Like I said, I was like, I've woken up with bruises that I didn't know how I got them worse than that.
I get bruises all the time that I'm like, how'd I do that?
Where did that come from? All right, yeah, and then it looked just as bad as whatever she had in the movie. So it's like, okay, dude, all right. She'll be okay. I did like, though, in both of them, to some extent, she does kind of talk him out of it pretty quickly. This is another moment where Bella gets to, and the movie does it in this version, or in this one, where she does get to kind of have some agency and be like, look, it's fine. I was fine. I'm fine. I was happy until you got all sad, like, about nothing. You got all upset over nothing, and that's what's making me, upset and not feel good, because I was feeling great until this moment. So
we cut... Or is this after the honeymoon, or do we cut, like...
In the movie, we cut to a beach scene during the honeymoon.
During the honeymoon?
Where it's like Jacob and a bunch of them on the beach.
Uh-huh.
And it's... Because this is also around the time in the book where we switch to Jacob's perspective, roughly. It's a little bit later. It's after she finds out she's pregnant, and then starts heading back. So we actually don't get this scene in the book, I don't think. But this is like this takes the place of some of the more Jacob stuff later on.
Yeah, it takes the place of a couple scenes, kind of, between Jacob and Lee that happen later on in the book. Which, we have a lot of notes about this that were kind of scattered all throughout our different sections. So I tried to, like, put it all here so we could just talk about it. I thought the book had some kind of compelling stuff in their conversations about how, like, similar Jacob and Lee actually are, and they're kind of in, like, similar situations. Because
Leah is the ex of Sam.
Yes.
Sam imprinted on Emily.
Yes.
Who we've, like, seen once in the movie since the first one or whatever, or the second one, I guess.
I mean, we've only seen her once in the book.
Yeah, she's kind of just not I thought she was going to be an important character. She's like not at all. She seemed like, she's set up, she gets like a reveal and stuff.
She's just our introduction to the idea of imprinting, and that's literally it.
Yeah. So Leah, Sam was with Leah, then he imprinted on Emily, so now Leah is like the odd one out, and it mirrors Jacob's sort of third wheelness with Edward and Bella, obviously. So yeah, they're similar in that way. Which is the thing they discuss numerous times throughout the book, and have a big conversation about it towards the end of Jacob's section in the first half of the book. And they also have that similar conversation in the movie.
Yeah.
But my big thing with the whole Leah thing is that if you didn't read the book, and this is true for a lot of this movie, but just in general, if you hadn't read the book, I don't know how much of any of Leah's storyline makes like any sense to viewers.
I would have a really hard time parsing that if you would even be able to follow any of what she's upset about.
Yeah.
Not having read the book, because the movie version is so like chopped down and they like crushed things together,
and there's so many all of her scenes that she's in, there's so many other bits of information being relayed to you that you would easily lose and forget the fact. Like I would have been like, oh, she was with Sam, and like I don't even know if any of that would add up to me if I hadn't read the book, where I had this, you know what I mean?
And it doesn't help that the movies have kind of continually stumbled over how to convey the mechanics of the wolf pack and being a werewolf. Like, the movies just don't know how to do it. They just don't know how to convey any of that to the audience.
And it is hard because, there's the other thing that the movies I thought have also done a really bad job sort of conveying that we get a little bit more of in this one is that they all read each other's minds.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's harder to do in the movie because the book, we get to hear Jacob say, oh, whenever I turn into a wolf, they all can hear my thoughts and know instantly what I'm thinking of, everything
he constantly harps on that.
Yeah. So we get that, but in the movie, it's they kind of like, there's a scene in this one where after he finds out that Bella's pregnant and he morphs, like we hear like whispers of like, and we as book readers know, okay, that's them like hearing his thoughts and stuff. But I don't know if that would because I couldn't remember if they had explained that in the movies or not. And I think they did, but I couldn't remember. So yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, all of the stuff with Leah is not helped by that issue. Now, while I do think the reason that I have this note in better in the book is that I think these scenes in the book were easier to follow.
Yes.
And they better conveyed Leah's anxieties.
Yeah, for sure.
However, there's some really yikesy, we'll call it trans panic stuff.
Yeah.
In the book that I was really glad to see the movie cut.
I wasn't expecting it, and it was kind of came out of nowhere. It's something that Jacob and Leah discuss during their sort of they have like a big discussion towards the end of the Jacob section where she wants to, after she joins his pack, and she wants to stay in his pack going forward, and they talk about how they're similar with the relationships and stuff, but she also talks about how she feels like she's a genetic dead end because she hasn't, and nobody's imprinted on her. She hasn't imprinted on anybody. And she's like the only female werewolf that's like ever been known or whatever.
Yeah. As far as we know, as far as like their, like the history of their tribe and whatever says, she's the only female werewolf. And she talks about how she has stopped menstruating.
Yeah.
She says something really she says like I'm 20 and menopausal or something like that.
Yeah.
So she's like stopped menstruating and she has these anxieties about like not being able to move forward with her life in that way.
Yeah. Because she talks about it in relation to sort of understanding Rosalie's motivation about wanting to be able to, about wanting a child so bad, and that's because she can't have a kid. And Leah going like, I get that because, I also am dealing with like the same situation type thing. But she also has a line, and this is what you're getting at, where she basically, and I think this is a perfectly reasonable, I won't say reasonable, it's a potentially realistic thing for somebody to contemplate and wonder, but the book doesn't take this and then have any sort of good commentary on it, is that she does wonder if she's not female enough, quote unquote, because she became a werewolf, if there's something like if she's somehow... Like she worries essentially that there's something wrong with her. Yeah. Quote unquote, because... Essentially meaning that she's actually like a man or something, or something like that. And that this is somehow something
That's
wrong
why I
with her.
called it trans panic, because it kind of at least borders on that kind of idea. Yeah.
And I think this idea could be interesting in a story where this was the focus. And done by an author who had an actually good and progressive viewpoint on this, because I think like her coming to terms and thinking about that and not being sure is like a lot of really and sort of the identity of her becoming a werewolf and being the only like there's a lot there to work with that I think could be done really interesting, but that nothing happens with it in this. It's just kind of like
I would actually love to read like a really good like critical, like transgender critical theory perspective on Leah's character. I think really that would be really interesting. If anybody knows of one, please send it to me.
I wonder, because
I would love to read that.
Yeah, I don't know if she has more in the second half too that would add to that or not. But yeah, it is. Yeah, I think there's a lot there. Again, we know Stephenie's motivations and not motivations, but like thematically the kind of where she's coming from. And this isn't. She's not, at least we can assume, she's not a particularly progressive and inclusive person when it comes to trans identity and stuff like that. So
probably not.
If I had to go out on a limb. So it seems unlikely that there's any sort of introspection here, and that this is anything other than like an actual like gross kind of take on gender identity.
Yeah.
And like gender essentialism in some way.
Yeah.
Like it feels like, because the book doesn't actually comment on it in any way that at least leaves it an interesting sort of, because it could be an interesting critique of gender essentialism.
Yeah.
Like very easily, but it feels instead like just an embrace, like
It's just something that she tosses out there as a problem, kind of.
Yeah, it's just she feels bad about it, and the book doesn't go, maybe you shouldn't feel bad about it. The book goes, yep, she just feels bad about it.
Bad.
And she feels like not a woman, and that's weird, I guess. I don't know, moving on. Like, there's just nothing, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't do anything. And yeah, in the hands of a different author, I think it could be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. There's a super terrible scene in the movie where when Jacob, I guess is it the first time he goes and sees Bella and realizes that she's pregnant, where he goes into the room and all of the Cullens are just like standing posed around the living room.
Yes.
And they all like deliver information, and it felt so wildly bad. It felt like a high school play with everyone standing on their mark, waiting to deliver their line.
There were several. This was probably the movie so far that stuck out to me as having the worst acting. Mm-hmm. Not that it's all bad, and in general, still, I think in general, Kristen Stewart and Taylor Lautner and Robert Pattinson all do okay still. Roughly, Robert Pattinson, you can tell he's not quite as into it as he was maybe the first one or two.
Yeah.
But
well, and we talked about this, I think, in the prequel, that surely this was not what they thought they were signing on for, any of them.
In the prequel. There's no way, because again, from what little I know of Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, at least, because they've gone on to do a lot more stuff and do interviews, and they're a little bit more outspoken, like politically and stuff. I can't imagine that either of them are pro-life or and we're into this weird fanfic nightmare, like pro-life message that they signed up for. I can't, like, that's not what they thought they were doing when they were like, we're going to be in a vampire love story. And then book 4, they're like, what is happening? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that very clearly reflects in Robert Pattinson's sort of relative interest in being in these movies as time went on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but there's lots of little moments where the acting is suffering, and I don't know if it's the direction, I don't know if it's the writing, or a combination of all of them. This scene is really bad, though. It's just a lot of like, expositing in a circle.
Yeah,
like
they just like shout different bits of exposition at Jacob. In turn. Yeah, and it's so bad.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier. Let's go back to that scene with the wolf pack.
Yeah, this is after Jacob finds out that Bella's pregnant, and then he turns into a wolf and runs out, and then they have a big wolf powwow. Yeah. Or whatever, wolf meeting. Yeah. You just didn't like it in the movie. I don't disagree. I had this in the movie, nailed it, because... So you have this better in the book, and I don't disagree that it works better in the book. Yeah, the whole meeting where they're all in wolf form, sort of in each other's head talking. In the movie, it's a loud mess. There's literally there's 3 things going on. There's a score, a very loud score of like dramatic music. There's wolf snarling, like wolves like yipping and snarling and making noises at each other. And then on top of that, there is the voiceover, like this big echoey, boomy voiceovers of our characters in wolf form talking. So we're hearing their thoughts essentially.
But they're not just talking though. They're like all talking at over once. Each other and at the same time.
Because this is that them like in each other's head type of thing. Yeah. And so to me, it works in the sense that it feels chaotic and like it puts you a little bit in the headspace of that moment, in sort of the chaotic, like they're growling and talking over, like it's this big chaotic mess. That being said, it's a nightmare. Like it's impossible to watch. And if you hadn't read the book, I don't know how you would.
I refuse to believe anyone who had not read the book would be able to follow this scene. I feel like you would just be like, what's happening?
Yes.
What's going on?
It's literally...
Why is the movie doing this to me?
It's a cacophony of just sound and yeah. And like I said, the choice to do the voiceovers with the big soaring score, with all the barking, I think I
understand what the director was going for.
Yes, I get it.
Does it work?
But I will say this movie does lean more into book fan service this is potentially a problem, and it's a thing you always kind of have to ride a fine line with when adapting something, is how much are you leading into making fans of the book happy versus making a good movie that a general moviegoer can appreciate. And I could see making the choice as the director to go, who's watching these movies anymore? It's not... There is just a general movie audience that probably never read the books but just got into the movies, I'm sure. That were like the same kind of people who liked the books but just didn't read them but also liked the movies, probably. But it had to be like a choice. These books are so popular, we're just going to make it for what the book fans want.
I totally
get that.
Yeah.
To some extent.
With something like Twilight.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you compare it to, like, let's say Lord of the Rings or even Harry Potter, there's probably more of a focus like, okay, we can also get the general audience.
Yeah.
But with Twilight, I feel like you might be thinking, I don't have a shot at getting much of a general audience. It's mostly going to be book people.
And more importantly, with this specific book,
yes,
he read this book.
Absolutely.
Who is this book? This book could never be made into anything that a normal person would like.
When we did the prequel, I had not read very far into the book yet, and you had that fun fact about how Bill Condon said that he loved the book.
Yeah, he said he imprinted on it very quickly.
I refuse to believe that he loved this book. I refuse.
He just said he loved it during a press tour. He also said the full quote was something like, "It's as readers know, it's a very unique book, and I'm looking to make a very unique movie," or something along those lines. So he knew,
because I feel like he signed on to do these movies, and then he read the book. And he was like, "Oh, what have I done?
Yeah,
what have I done?"
Absolutely.
Because as we have discussed, you would not get this from having read the first 3 books, or watched the first 3 movies.
No,
even if he had done all of those things prior to signing on, you would never in a million years guess
that this is where it was going.
This is where it was going.
No, not even a little bit. No, not even a little bit.
Not even a little.
Yeah.
But to go back to that werewolf scene for a second, I think my main issue with it as a film scene is that it is impossible to follow just on its own. But like I said, the movies have always struggled to really explain how the werewolves work. I don't know that the movies ever explained the wolf hive mind.
No, that's what I said earlier. Yeah, I don't know if they have fully. I think there's been at least one line about it, but
I feel like maybe there was at least one throwaway line in Eclipse about the whole alpha thing.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't read this book, I wouldn't have known that was what was happening in that scene of the movie where Sam tries to force Jacob to obey, and then Jacob is
no.
Jacob is like, "No, I'm the true alpha."
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to follow what was happening at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. I agree completely. I don't think it would make any sense if you had not read the books. So that's why they made it that way. They're like, "This, we know who we're making this for," would be my guess.
I guess so.
So there's a little moment that they figure out, we'll talk about this later, they figure out the baby needs blood.
Takes them way too long to figure it out.
We'll get to that part. And they're going to get some blood, and there's this fun moment in the book that happens in the movie, but very differently and not as funny. Rosalie goes to get the blood, and she's in the other room, and we hear her, they hear her in the kitchen or whatever.
Yeah.
And
we're in Jacob's
we're in
perspective
Jacob's perspective, and he's in the living room with Bella and Edward, and Rosalie's in the other room, and we hear her banging some stuff around, and you hear her make a noise, and then you hear Edward goes, "Not clear," or something like that, and there's no context for it at first. I figured out right away what he meant, and then she walks out with a like a paper cup or a styrofoam cup or whatever with the blood in it, and that's what Bella drinks it out of. And in the movie, it's similar. Like, Carlisle pours the blood into a glass, but there's no conversation about it. Edward walks over and just puts it in a styrofoam cup.
Yeah.
And he might make but the way it's done in the book actually made me chuckle. Like, and especially with Rosalie's character and just like the mind reading of Edward. I thought it all just played a lot better in the book. It's a little like gag, but I don't know. I thought it was funny, and the movie just doesn't do it. And I was like, okay. The movie kind of does it. It's just not funny. And also later on, this is the thing the movie drops completely, is Jacob and Rosalie's like tension.
Yeah,
like
they have
banter.
they have some antagonistic banter.
Yeah, he makes blonde jokes and she makes like dog jokes and that sort of thing. And there's one moment where she brings him some food she bends a metal bowl into a dog dish and scratches his not his name, scratches like Fido on the side and gives him some food. And after he's done eating, he I don't remember what happens. She says something or does something, and he chucks the bowl at her head. And it bounces off her head. I just wanted to see that in the movie. And I guess they didn't want Jacob hurling metal objects at women. I get it. I get it. But still.
The movie adds some more tension between the wolves, not Jacob and the Clearwaters, but the other wolves, between the wolves and the Cullens, and kind of like everybody who's protecting Bella, which I understand that. I have a note about that later. We'll just talk about it later. I don't want to go find it. But then there's a scene partway through where Jacob has to help some of the Cullens get out of the house so that they can feed and they can get some more blood for Bella to drink.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to follow.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. So there's in the book they have this meeting. Jacob has this meeting with like a couple of the wolves, and they discuss like what's going on. And there's like, we're not going to. I don't even remember exactly what happens. They basically just come to
like a stalemate.
Basically like a stalemate. Again, I don't even remember enough about that scene. But there's a similar scene in the book or in the movie where they go and they go out into the woods, and Jacob like confronts. And has a conversation with all of them except for like Sam or whatever. And in the movie, it's like this weird triple agent moment where, so in the movie, Jacob walks out there and then he has this discussion with them and he goes, okay, here's the deal. We're going to make a deal. You take Leah and Seth back into the pack and I'll take care of the baby. He's like, I'll kill it. And they're like, oh. And he's like, yeah.
He's like, I'm the only one who can do it because they trust me.
Because they trust me.
Enough.
And so it gives us this weird moment of like, oh, maybe he is like, oh, is he going to be like a double agent? And this is not a thing that happens in the movie. And so I thought or in the book. And so I was like, are they setting up this weird like sort of double agent thing? But then it turns out that was all just a ploy.
Yeah, he's just distracting them so that Carlisle and Esme and Emmett can get out of the house
to go hunt.
And then the whole time that Jacob is having this conversation with them, we're like cutting to those three.
Yeah,
and they're like
getting chased by
they're
other
getting
wolves.
chased
like
by
Sam,
some of the other werewolves, and they like almost get Esme.
Yeah,
and it's like it's hard to follow. It's confusing and chaotic.
Well, and it's because it's like multiple book moments combined into one. Kind of, because in the book, him and Seth just go check and make sure there are no werewolves around, and that's what allows the Cullens to go hunt. Like they just go, they go like scout it out, and they're like, all right, you're good. They're not around, or whatever. Yeah, and then they just go out hunting. In this one, they like have a meeting as a distraction, whereas the meeting in the book is just a meeting that they have.
Yeah, it's just a meeting that they have to like talk things out and figure out what's going on.
And then there's this added wrinkle of Jacob potentially going to betray the Cullens, which isn't an element in the book. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe they're setting, because we do know ultimately in the book that Jacob decides to to kill the baby.
Yeah.
But in the book, it's this last minute, pure, like, emotion driven. He just watched Bella die as he was, like, giving her CPR, and he's, like, losing his mind, essentially. And he's like, I'm going to kill this baby because it killed Bella. And it's like this, he just snaps, essentially, is how it's portrayed in the book.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie, I thought for this moment where he's like, I'll take care. I'm like, he's going to have been, like, planning this the whole time? Is that where the movie's going to take this? Because that's weird. Like, that's a weird choice. But then it's not that, which makes it more...
I feel like the movie wanted us to understand that he was just distracting them and, like, playing them, but it was not clear.
And here's the issue where if this is for book readers, this makes it more confusing because we know he does try to consider killing the baby eventually.
Yes.
So for book readers, we're like, oh, is this them setting that up now?
Yeah.
At least that's what I read it as, because I do think you're right. I do think it is supposed to be like, oh, he's clearly like distracting him or whatever. But since I know that ultimately he's going to potentially think about and try to kill the baby, him saying he'll do it now makes me think, oh, is this a prelude to that? Oh, no, it's not. He was just lying to them to okay, it's a mess. The book version's better.
It's all a mess. At one point, there is a scene where Jacob gets upset. It's after Edward realizes that he can hear the baby.
Yeah, and they're like, now Edward, who's also been on sort of Jacob's side of not wanting the child because it's killing Bella, is now like...
He's crossed over to the enemy, to the dark side.
So Jacob's very upset about this.
So Jacob gets upset, and Edward realizes he's upset and gives him his car keys. And Jacob goes out to the car and like thinking like, "Oh, I'm gonna wreck this guy's Volvo."
Yeah.
But then it turns out Edward has given him the keys to the Aston Martin James Bond car,
the Vanquish.
Yeah. And then Jacob drives to Seattle and stares at random girls trying to imprint on them.
I do wish that scene had been in the
movie. And it was so stupid, and I wanted it to be in the movie so bad. It was so dumb. I loved it.
I will say that scene would have been hilarious in the movie, just Taylor Lautner walking through a park,
just like glaring
at random women. Yeah, would have made me laugh, but that was a good decision to cut that out because it's a weird little and then he runs into like manic pixie dream girl, like at the literally, like her name's Lizzie, and and she knows about cars, and she's got a sick sense of humor, bro. Like it's real. Oof.
And there was a nice little scene that got cut from the movie, where Edward asks for Jacob's permission to break the treaty and save Bella's life after she gives birth, or after the C-section, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's not in the movie, but I thought it was like a nice little moment between them.
Was that not in the movie?
I don't think so.
I thought it was.
I don't recall it being in the movie.
I thought he was like, I read most of this, that the last 100 pages of this I read as the morning of us watching the movie, so some of it got a little blurred in terms of where I remember conversations from. So for me, the biggest thing that's better in the book is the entire birth scene. Is just so much better in the book and left to your imagination as opposed to how it's done in a PG-13 movie.
Yes.
They do some disturbing things, but also some of it just comes across comical. In particular, the part where she first, it happens the same in the book and the movie, where she like drops her cup of blood and then tries to reach for it. And this like breaks her. But in the movie, it's just like, it seems like she bends weird, or in the book, she seems to like bend weird. And this turns out it like separates
tears the placenta
or something. And this causes issues. So they have to like go do a C-section right away. And in the movie though, the way it's shot, she like twists and it looks like she literally breaks in half.
Yeah, it looks wild.
It looks so weird, but not in like a super like necessarily like a gross body horror way. More of like a silly, almost slapsticky, like looking. What is happening? And it's super weird too, because there is a moment later, like where the baby breaks her spine in the book, like while she's laying on the operating bed or whatever. There's a moment where her spine breaks and she gets paralyzed essentially. which I think that's what this was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think
it's what it
so.
looked like, but it didn't. You couldn't tell because I couldn't remember if she could walk after that or not. I can't remember. But anyway, she does that, and then she falls, and there's this very specific close-up shot of her bony knees hitting the ground. And again, it is a little like off-putting and like but it's also like almost silly. It's hard. Yeah. It's weird.
I don't know. In the book, she vomits a fountain of blood, and I was really hoping
for the vomiting a fountain
that
of blood.
Kristen Stewart would at least get to vomit a fountain of blood.
Yes,
in this movie,
and she does not.
She does not.
Nah, that was disappointing. But yeah, that's just it's just way gnarlier in the book. The movie is all just like a montage. Like when they get to the actual like birthing suite part and they're like operating, like it's all just like close-ups and sweating and screaming, which it's a PG-13 movie. They couldn't show a whole lot of stuff. I get it. But it's I like legitimately, Stephenie Meyer actually writes like weird body horror pretty well. Mm-hmm. Like I was actually sort of impressed with how good like that the whole part from the pregnancy on and her transformation all was like really well written in a way that I was in a way where a lot of the action scenes I get lost and am not able to like imagine what's happening. Mm-hmm. I had the exact opposite situation here where I had a very vivid imagination based on what she had written of what was going on during the birthing scene and ultimately when Bella starts to transform and stuff like that. Yeah,
because we switch back to Bella's perspective after the birth. Well, we get like a little bit of it again from her perspective.
Yeah, we kind of go back in time, like to the moment where she goes into labor, essentially.
But the stuff where she was just laying there, like and undergoing this vampire transformation, was actually really interesting.
Yes, it was really interesting.
Like I had a note, like I was like, it's really a shame that none of this is going to be in the movie because like getting her perspective on it is actually really interesting.
And I'm surprised they didn't do because this is one of the first movies where we don't really get an opening Bella voiceover monologue. It's like a quote from Shakespeare or something, or I don't remember what in the movie, but that would have been, I feel like, a good moment to have her to do something where it zooms into her perspective. Instead we zoom into a CG blood body, her insides, and like see
it goes like Magic School Bus for a minute.
Yeah, it looks okay, but it doesn't, like Bella's talking through of the transformation process in the book and explaining like feeling the fire spread to different parts of her body and like counting the breaths and that being like how she keeps track of how long this is taking because it feels like a never-ending thing, and like she counts Edward's breaths because they're the slowest thing in the room, like or something like that, so the more breaths she counts the longer it'll been. Or it's like, again, the way that that whole transformation scene is written just really does evoke a lot of like really interesting imagery and stuff, and I don't know how you do it really well in the movie. It's not terrible in the movie, but it doesn't have the same oomph, like interest.
You don't get the same thing out of it as a viewer that you do as a reader.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a moment in the book where the baby, after the baby is born, Bella asks to hold the baby, and they give Renesmee to her, and then it bites her.
Yeah,
and that's in the movie. But if you didn't read the book, you would have no idea.
Yeah, they don't show it.
You hear a sound effect of the baby go, "Mah," and then like Edward goes, "Oh, Renesmee, no," and like takes her away. But in the book, it says like, and there was like a little bite mark on her chest, like a little teeth mark on her chest.
Yeah.
But the camera pulls back in the movie, and it's not there. And I'm like, what is that? Like some weird MPAA thing?
Maybe.
Like you can't have no vampire babies. Like what? I don't like what? I did not understand why that was not.
But you can see that the baby has teeth.
Yeah.
And we love a baby with a full set of teeth.
Yes.
It's not weird at all.
Yeah.
And then there's a post-credit scene with the Volturi.
Yeah, there is.
Which was something.
They just had to remind us of them because we haven't seen them. We haven't seen Arrow since New Moon, basically. He was in clips for a half second, right? Like in the movie.
I think so.
Like he shows up at one point, maybe not even then. I don't remember.
I don't remember it. But I guess the movies are really making Arrow just like the straight up villain, which makes sense. He's like the main one that we interact with. in the movies and in the books,
And in the
really.
book, yeah.
And he is like the big name in the Volturi.
Yeah, he's also the best actor in the movie. So
True. But I do think I prefer the more nuanced characterization from the books, where he's kind of like trying to play both sides and like be nice, but also he's clearly a villain.
I haven't gotten to him again in this book yet, so I don't know where he's going in the rest of this book. So I don't have a lot of input on him yet. We'll see. I'm not there yet.
We shall see.
Because I mean, I loved him in New Moon, but I just haven't. I literally have not read a page of Arrow since New Moon. So, all right, that's it for Better in the Book. Let's go ahead and talk about what was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
We talked about this when we were watching. I don't know if it makes a ton of sense here, but the movies have never explained this before, which is a thing the books have talked about earlier, which is that Edward used to kill humans, but what he did, he was Dexter, basically, when he was a vampire.
Yeah, he was a dark vigilante.
Yeah, he would go around and hunt like serial killers and like bad criminals
like
and
rapists
stuff.
and
And I thought it was kind of fun seeing the flashback to him walking around, turn of the century England or America.
I think it looked like it was like the 20s, maybe.
Yeah, not turn of the century. Sorry,
But,
he was a kid at turn of the century because he got turned when he was 17 in like 1917.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like the Roaring 20s or whatever. And he's walking around.
They're at like a
being
movie
dapper,
theater.
yeah,
he's very dapper.
killing
A dapper murderer.
other murderers. It's fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is kind of a weird time. I feel like the movies were like, oh yeah, we never talked about that.
Yeah.
Let's just work that in there real quick.
Yeah,
but it doesn't not work.
No. And the context for it doesn't make a ton of sense because it's just like, he's like, are you sure you want to turn still? This is what I used to do. And she's like, kill serial killers? And he's like, yeah, but I felt bad about it, okay? Like, I don't know. It's just, the context of it doesn't make a ton of sense, like when they decide to bring it up. But I like seeing it. There's a thing in the book that, so she's surprised at how okay with her getting married Charlie is in the book. And there's a line about how she goes, although I have a feeling a big part of that is that me and Edward won't be living in sin when we're away at college. And I was like, ugh, great.
Gross.
So like that's part of the reason Charlie is okay with them getting married, is that way they're not shacking up before they're right in the eyes of the Lord or whatever. Yeah, okay.
Also, live in sin in college.
Yeah.
That's the time
That's
for it.
when you do it.
If you're going to do it in college. It is the best time.
We're still living in sin.
That's true.
No, we're engaged. I don't know. No, that still
That's
counts.
still living in sin.
Yeah.
Trust the former Catholic to know. I actually felt like Bella's nightmare in the movie made more sense given what her anxieties are. Because, I mean, the movie doesn't talk about the immortal children.
Yes.
We brought that up. But, so I guess it, like, doubly wouldn't make sense for the movies to show, like, a child in her dream. But I also just feel like what the movie did with it made more sense.
She has this nightmare before the wedding, where she's at the wedding and then some stuff happens. And I had this in the movie, nailed it, because I did like that they included this imagery, which is a thing in the book, which is a big pile of the dead bodies of her friends and family.
Yeah.
In the book, the difference is that on top of it is this child, which again, I still don't know what that means yet, unless it's unless it was like a weird call forward to Renesmee or something. I don't know. But I liked the imagery, the mystery of the child. Reading the book, not knowing what that means or what that is going to be, I liked that imagery in the book, this weird mystery child, and I liked that tease for me of like, what's that? What is that? What was this dream about? Whereas in the movie, I don't disagree that having her and Edward on top of the corpses of her friends and family makes a lot of sense thematically, and with her, like you said, her anxieties and stuff. I think it works, and I liked the imagery of it either way. I just like the added mystery of what does this mean in the book, which we don't get in the movie.
Speaking of the immortal children, the book does a lot of planting of the immortal child thing. But we don't really need to know about it until part 2.
Yeah.
So I felt like the movie made a good decision to just kind of almost entirely omit that.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I had it in better in the book, but I think because I thought it was interesting. But again, not knowing how the second half of this goes, I didn't know if it needed to be mentioned now or not.
Yeah.
And if it does come up in part 2, then cool. That's fine. I could see not bringing it up in part 1.
And also, honestly, in the book, I had that, how classically Stephenie, it really feels like, oh, this is the first time we're hearing about immortal children because this is the first time it's going to be relevant to the story.
Yeah.
Like, this has never come up in the lore before, but it's relevant now, so
Yeah.
here's all of the backstory.
Yeah.
Classic Stephenie. The movie added an aside line for Renee as she passes on Bella's grandmother's like hair comb to her to wear at her wedding. And she has like an aside line about how she can pass it on to her daughter.
Oh, I missed that.
Which I thought was a good add, considering, you know, that we've established that Bella won't be having children at this point, but also she's going to have a daughter later.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The book also added a little moment of Jessica, the movie.
I do it all the time. So I do that all the time, and I always try to I know I miss half of them. So if I ever do that, you can do it to me. I think it's helpful, but maybe not. I don't know. Sorry, continue.
But the movie does adds a moment of Jessica making like a snide comment about how Bella must be pregnant because why else would you get married at 18?
Yes.
Which I thought was a good way to acknowledge because Bella does have some like anxiety that people are going to think that.
She talks about it a lot in the
clips.
Book.
Yeah. Which totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But so I thought that was a good way for the movie to acknowledge that while also giving it to a character that it makes sense coming from.
Yeah, it does, for sure. Speaking of the wedding, there's a moment that in the book that I was just like, oh boy. And this is, again, a part of this is a difference in characterization of book Edward versus movie Edward, I feel like. Mm-hmm. In the book, they do the wedding ceremony, they get to the end, and they get to the I do's. And the way it is described in the book is that Edward's I do, quote, rang out victorious, end quote. And I was like, really? Stephenie Meyer, the victorious is the descriptor you want to go for there? And I think maybe that makes sense for Book Edward, although even at this point, he's not Book Edward from beginning of Eclipse. Like, he's not the same anymore. But the movie version changes it to just, they say very quiet I do's to each other, like very reserved sort of, you know, I do's to each other. And I like that decision more than this weird, like, Victoria, I do. I have vanquished the vagina. Like, I don't know. The way it read in the book was really, I was like, oh God, all right. This has got a very weird vibe from it that there's just, I don't know. I was just like, I like the much more personal way it comes across in the movie.
We're always out here getting weird vibes from Edward. So.
Yeah. And speaking of a little change at the wedding too, that right after the I do's is when they kiss. Oh, this is fun. It's a little cheesy, but I think it works. Where the camera spins around them, and as it spins around, revealing the audience or the crowd, you know, all the people watching, they're all gone, and it's just empty seats, and it's just Edward and Bella kissing for like, I don't know, like 30 seconds. And then it spins back around, and then the crowd's all there again. It's a fun little, like, you know, kind of just them, like their moment. There's no one there. This is like sort of gets across that idea of sort of everybody else being like invisible in that moment, and just the two of them. It's kind of a fun little. Okay,
but they totally stole that from the 2005 Pride and Prejudice
adaptation.
They? Yeah,
I've seen that, but
there's the years. First time I believe it is that Darcy and Lizzie dance. They're like doing a circle movement, and as the room revolves, they're like everybody else vanishes, and they're the only ones in the room. Which is probably, I mean, that probably stole it from somewhere else. I don't know.
That was gonna be what I was saying. Is like when I said it's a little cheesy, it's like there's no way it was the first thing to have ever done this. I didn't.
But that was what it reminded me of. Like that's what I recognized that trope, I guess.
Yeah, it's a clever little thing that I think works well. I don't know. Again, it's not like, yeah, it's fun.
I thought the movie having them walk through a street carnival in Rio was kind of sweet.
Yeah, I had the same note too. I thought it's a little short scene, but they're driving to the dock or whatever to get on the boat, and they see this party, like a street carnival or whatever going on. There's like music and food and dancing and stuff, and they kind of walk through it. Edward has the driver stop, and they get out and they kind of walk around and kind of walk through this party. And it's one of those moments which these movies just don't have enough of just them enjoying each other's company. Like,
because there's no time for it.
I know there's no time for it, but it's a little moment, but it's nice to see them just like have fun together and be like, oh yeah,
like, oh, they do actually enjoy each other's company. That's nice.
Yeah, we only get a second of it, but like, hey, look at that. Look at them being like a couple that enjoy things together. Wow, great. And then they get to their honeymoon and they actually have sex, which the book skips over, which I guess I get.
There are a lot of rules in young adult publishing about what you can and can't say.
There are a lot of rules
sex.
by the MPAA for PG-13 movies, as we discussed in the sequel or in the prequel episode, where apparently Kristen Stewart did a bit too much thrusting. Although I bet her doing a bit too much thrusting was in the second sex scene and not the first sex scene. But yeah, there's actually like a sex scene to some extent. Again, it's a PG-13 movie made for It's not explicit, but it doesn't need to be. I didn't want it to be explicit. I'm just saying that, like, in the book, we're just like they're in the ocean, and then it cuts to the next morning.
Yeah.
She wakes up and is like, "Wow, that was great." And I actually didn't even know at first if they had sex or not until we get a little bit further on. I thought, oh, maybe they just didn't. Like, maybe they just like sat in the ocean and then came back in. But yeah, I felt like it you kind of have to have at least a little bit of a sex scene.
Yeah.
And we get to see him destroy stuff, which is fun.
Yes.
Because we see the aftermath in the book. We don't
right.
see it happening.
We do get to see him destroy the headboard.
Although we don't get to see him bite the pillow, which was disappointing. Like shred a pillow.
I would have loved to see Robert Pattinson chew on a pillow.
He was probably like, I'm not doing that. I will break this headboard, but I am not gnawing on a pillow on camera. I'm sorry.
And then this whole movie was worth it. Just for the brief little scene.
God.
They do a montage of Bella wearing different lingerie in an attempt to seduce Edward into having more sex.
This is
with
also
her.
mixed with, this is after he stopped having sex, and this is also mixed with the montage of them like doing stuff, which is something that happens in the book of like him tiring her out by like going hiking and scuba diving and blah blah blah.
They do all kinds of stuff, but it's interspersed with like her in different sets of lingerie. And this one little shot where she gets into bed wearing lingerie and she lays down on her stomach and he just looks forlornly at her ass and then covers her with a blanket.
Stares right at it for like a solid 3 seconds. It's so hilarious. It's so hilarious. He's just looking right at her butt. And then he's just like, no, cover that up. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's so stupid and so funny. We both laughed a lot at that one. Oh, it's amazing.
So then we fast forward to after Bella has realized that she's pregnant. They're still on Isle Esme. She's realized that she's pregnant. And there is the housekeeper character in both the book and the movie, whose name is...
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Kaure.
Yeah.
Kare, maybe?
Corey?
I don't know,
yeah.
But she, and we establish a little bit earlier in the honeymoon that she's suspicious of Edward.
Yeah.
Because they're myths in this area. They have a myth about... a male demon who,
like an incubus
like an incubus who seduces and kills beautiful young women.
Yeah,
and she suspects that is what Edward is.
Yeah.
After Bella realizes that she's pregnant, she like loses her mind and is like yelling at him and in the book. But they have a conversation in the movie, and I thought it was interesting because we don't know what they say to each other in the book. It's all in Portuguese, which Bella does not know a lick of Portuguese.
Yeah.
But in the movie we get subtitles, and it's basically Edward like begging her for information.
Yeah.
Like, how can she survive this?
Yeah.
I didn't know this would happen. How can she get through this?
Yeah. Yeah, and because the exact same conversation happens in the book, but yeah, we just don't know what's being said except for the last line. Because she says the same thing, mort,
Yeah.
which is death or whatever. So we got that part, but we didn't know, and you don't really need it, but it is interesting knowing what Edward is saying and like that he's asking for help. Basically, is it's interesting. So then we cut forward quite a bit. This is my next note. Is after they get back and this is after Jacob finds out and comes over that Bella's pregnant, blah blah blah, all this stuff happens. There's this moment where Jacob goes outside and Edward goes out to have a conversation with him, and there's this moment where Jacob's really mad at him and is like, I'm gonna kill him or whatever. And then he gets outside and Edward turns around. I have to read this because it felt, I was like, I have to see this in the movie. I have to see how they do this. Because I can't imagine this. I can't imagine Robert Pattinson doing this. For a second, he stopped without warning and pivoted. This is from Jacob's perspective. He stopped without warning and pivoted to face me. His expression froze me again. For a second, I was just a kid who had lived all of his life in the same tiny sound, just a child, because I knew I would have to live a lot more, suffer a lot more to ever understand the searing agony in Edward's eyes. He raised a hand as if to wipe sweat from his forehead, but his fingers scraped against his face like they were going to rip his granite skin right off. His black eyes burned in their sockets out of focus. Or seeing things that weren't there. His mouth opened like he was going to scream, but nothing came out. That was the face of a man would have if he were burning at the stake.
So basically he becomes the Scream.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm like, I have to know if they're going to do that. Because I can't imagine... Edward is not that... Like, that doesn't...
Yeah.
It's just... And I guess that's the point, is it's supposed to be like, this is so drastic. Edward is like,
right.
Composure is breaking. But it felt, I was like, that doesn't...
Well, and it wouldn't read right. It would just look silly.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It would just look silly.
Like, similar to a lot of the other vampire stuff that we've discussed throughout this series, there's no way to make him look as otherworldly as Stephenie Meyer wants him to look.
Yeah.
It just can't be done.
That's fair. So in the movie, he's just very visibly upset, and I think Robert Pattinson does a pretty good job with it. The scene, the way his emotions play out in that scene where he's having a conversation with Jacob feel much more like actually how Edward would handle that situation versus this weird, like, literally, like, over-the-top cartoon agony that is written in the book. I was like, there's no way that plays in the movie. And they just didn't do it, which I thought was a good good call.
I want to thank the movie for dropping the whole part where Edward tries to convince Jacob that, he could have a baby with Bella.
Convince her to have an abortion, and then you can baby her up.
To have a baby with her. She wants a baby, she'll get a baby. And then the book, he says, she can have puppies if that's what it takes. And I was like, why? Why would you say that?
Yeah.
Why, Stephenie?
Yeah, it's so bad. And it's like, I really do enjoy that. Yeah, they dropped this weird, Edward, like, begging him to impregnate Bella, which it's just, it doesn't go anywhere, for one thing. Jacob doesn't even really bring it up. Kind of. He does. He gets around to it. I can't remember exactly how that plays out. But it was just such a mess. I was like, oh boy, this is another one of those things. So this whole book feels like fan fiction, but this is one of those moments in particular that feels like one of those fanfic scenarios that it's just like, what are we doing? And then again, it never goes anywhere, so it doesn't really matter. It's just there for like weird, like vague fan service of some sort. I think this must be another moment of Stephenie working out her desire for the werewolf vampire human threesome.
Yeah. She's still working through it,
She's still
y'all.
getting through it, yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Stephenie just needs to live her best life and stop letting Mormonism fuck up all of her her vampire werewolf thruple life goals that she has. Just go get your vampire werewolf thruple and live your life, Stephenie Meyer. Nobody cares anymore. It's 2020. It's fine. You do you. So there's one of the biggest benefits of the movie, in my opinion, is that we're not in Jacob's head.
Yes.
So I made this joke. I mentioned this in a prequel, but boy, I thought there wasn't anybody's head I wanted to be in less than like Edward's when we talked about Midnight Sun, and then I read the Jacob part of this book, and I was like, no, there's no way this is worse than Edward, or this isn't worse than Edward. So I have a few just little beats here of things that we don't have to be privy to in Jacob's head in the movie because we don't hear his thoughts. At one point, Jacob thinks Leah is touchy because she winces whenever Sam calls them guys.
Yeah.
And which we find out later has more deep-seated sort of personal trauma. And maybe not trauma is not the right word, but personal conflict about that. But even if it was just like surface level, like, I'm not a guy, can you just like call us wolves or something, man? Like, and it's just one of those things because this is before we find out later about how Leah has these sort of, dealing with this inner turmoil about not being enough of a female or whatever, sort of struggling with her gender identity and stuff like that to some extent. That's before we know any of that. So when I read it at first, I literally just took it as like a very surface level, like, Jacob is mad that she is like a snowflake. Like she's excuse me, I would prefer if you used, gender neutral terms when addressing the wolf pack. And Jacob's like really mad about this.
Jacob's that person who's like, guys is gender neutral.
Yeah.
I'm from California and guys is gender neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. It just felt very like Jacob always feels like a raging incel in these books.
Yeah.
And this is one of those moments where it felt very in line with online incel discourse of.
While we're on the subject of Jacob's thoughts about Leah too, because you don't have this in here, but there's one other point where he's thinking about how when she was like right after she had started transforming into a werewolf, she had that phase where she would like lose her temper and explode out of her clothes like they all did.
Oh, I do remember
and
this.
He's
I
like,
almost wrote this down.
Not that she didn't have anything worth looking at.
Yeah.
But I was like, gross. That's gross.
Yeah, she's got pretty sweet tits, but like I kind of hate her because she's an annoying bitch. But at least she's got nice tits.
Basically. Yeah. That's what he thinks.
It's the protagonist whose head we're in. Fun. There's also a line after he finds out Bella is pregnant. He has this thought in his head where he looks at Bella and sees that she's pregnant, and he goes, "I didn't want to imagine him inside of her."
Cool, don't.
It's like, yeah, man. Nope, you could just not. Weirdo. And also when he goes back, as he shows up, I don't remember the exact situation. But
it's like the first time when he goes to the Collins, I think, and realizes that Bella's pregnant. But he's like making a plan for how he's going to kill them all.
Yeah, something like that. He's like, I'm going to kill him. And again, I don't remember exactly when it happens, but it's something around it's after he finds out she's pregnant. But yeah, he's like, I'm going to kill Edward, basically. But he also has this thought that he doesn't want to kill Alice and Esme because they're girls.
Yeah. He's like, I don't want to kill girls.
Yeah.
Even vampire girls.
Yeah. Great, man. Cool.
So chivalrous. Awesome. Such a white knight.
Yeah. And there's also, this isn't in his head, but this is a line he says out loud after he finds out Bella's pregnant that the movie drops, is they're discussing the whole thing, and Edward is like, Carlisle wants to do an abortion or whatever. And Jacob says to Bella, listen to Carlisle like a good girl. Oh, gross.
The only time the words good and girl should be together in that order is if you're talking about a dog.
You're talking about a dog or in very specific bedroom scenarios. That is it.
That's it. Any other time,
other times,
any
no.
other time, it's like one of the more disgusting combinations of words.
Nah. Talking about dogs, consenting sexual partners. Those are the only times. Outside of that, don't do it.
So the movie adds some tension between Sam's werewolf pack and the Cullens and everybody who's protecting Bella. Yeah. Which the book doesn't really have. We could talk about it a little bit. They kind of just come to a stalemate, and literally like nothing happens between those two factions, at least up to this point.
Yeah.
But the movie adds the idea that the wolves are like actually trying to starve the Cullens out. Like they're kind of keeping them trapped.
Yeah.
So that they can't go hunt and feed. And I thought that was interesting. Or it's at least more interesting than the literal nothing that happens in the book. It raises the stakes for the rest of the vampires, especially since the movie basically cuts all of Alice's drama with not being able to see Bella and the baby.
Yeah.
Because Alice has a whole thing in the book, which I don't have it in either of my sections because it was kind of neither here nor there for me.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but she has the where she's like basically has a headache all the time because it's not that she like can't see Bella, but because of the fetus, she says that Bella's it's like cloudy and like
out of focus,
yeah, like trying to watch an out of focus TV and it gives her a headache.
Yeah, it's like if you had the wrong prescription glasses or something.
Yeah,
like you would get a headache or whatever.
Yeah. But there are a couple of like nice moments, between her and Jacob where she's like, oh good, I'm glad you're here because at least I can't see anything when you're around.
Yeah, when you're around, you just like completely block it. So it's
just like a nice break.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree about though having the wolves like actively, because that's the other thing the book does is they get to this weird sort of like stalemate where the other Sam's pack won't attack because their numbers are too low.
Yeah.
So there's no threat. Like we just like in the book they're just like they're just waiting to see what happens basically. Whereas in the movie it's more they want it there's more tension like it,
right, like they're not gonna attack but the Cullens can't really leave.
Yeah, they can't leave and they don't know they could attack like they, you know they but in the book they have this conversation, that meeting we talked about with like Jared and them and Jacob, and they just sort of come to them like, all right, we'll just wait and see what happens. So then it kind of just dissolves any of the tension, whereas the movie leaves that tension hanging to make it. And then it kind of resolves it in a way that isn't resolved in the book, which we'll talk about later here very shortly. Or at least not resolved in the book yet. I'm sure it probably does to some extent eventually. The movie also drops Bella shit-talking artificial insemination and adoption. She has this conversation where they're talking about like other ways to have a baby or whatever. And she's like, but it's not my baby.
Yeah.
It's not. And it's like, woof, really essentializing the importance of having like a genetic child now, Stephenie Meyer. That's fun. Great.
It's good fun times.
Adopt. There's lots of kids that need to be adopted. Go do that.
I wonder if they would be able to adopt a human baby.
Yeah, I don't know.
That would be dangerous for the baby.
It's true. Maybe
or
not the best idea.
Really, really safe. Because, like, nothing could ever happen to you if your parents are, like, literally invincible.
Yeah.
Like, as long as they don't eat it.
Yeah, which I don't think they would. That's
I don't
not
think
an
they
issue.
would.
Edward seems to have it completely under control.
Yeah.
He pours random blood into cups all the time and doesn't seem to have an issue with it. So he seems pretty much under control.
I really liked, there was a little callback to Twilight in this movie.
Yeah.
We see Edward online trying to research vampire children.
Yeah, he Bing searches baby vampires.
But it looks kind of stylistically similar to the montage in Twilight of Bella researching vampires.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think of that. That is cool.
Which was a moment that we liked in the first movie.
Yeah, I just completely forgot about it. I also like that the movie gets rid of this. In the book, out of nowhere, Edward just calls Emmett and Jasper M and Jazz. And I was like, wait, what? He's got cute nicknames for him? All right.
I feel like he's done that throughout.
Has he?
Not as much. Because we haven't interacted with the Cullens as extensively.
No, I agree.
Until this book. But I feel like he has.
It really caught me off guard, and I was like, "Woof, don't like that. That's weird." I don't even know why it's weird. It's just something about it. He was like M and Jazz, and it was just like, "Wait, what?" It just felt so out of character for him, like calling Jasper. I don't know. I just wasn't expecting it.
I feel like Jasper wouldn't tolerate.
That's
Jazz
I think that's what I mean. Yeah. I was like, what? Jasper's way too serious to be called Jazz, and like I guess I get in sense of but that would make sense like if Alice called him Jazz, or somebody who had like a sense of humor. But like Edward doesn't, you know what I mean? Like I could see it in certain characters calling him Jazz as like a fun like prod because he doesn't like it. But Edward doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's like, Jazz, come on, Jazz. You know what I mean? Like, that's not his personality. At least
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like it from what we know of him.
Similarly, we never in the movie have to hear Bella refer to the baby as her little nudger.
Yes, we do not.
Which I hated.
Yep, that was gross.
I was like, thanks, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, it's weird.
And the movie also adds a moment where Edward and Bella fight about how she made that decision without him. And I mean, we could debate whether that's icky or not.
Yeah, it felt a little weird to me because it felt a little pro-lifey. Like it felt, like that idea of like.
But I do think that would be a realistic strain on their relationship.
I mean, maybe this is a controversial hot take, but I do think that is a legitimate in a relationship that isn't in a relationship that is like a committed relationship.
Yeah.
That is, I think, a tough thing to figure out, to discuss, and to obviously it's the woman's choice, and like you know, it's her body, her choice, that sort of thing. But at the same time, you can't ignore the impact that decision has on this other person who is part of that relationship, and so there is. It's a
weird, it's a weird thing to navigate. But I felt like that's why I felt like that was kind of a realistic thing to put in here. That like, they are in a committed relationship, and how do you navigate that when you have two such differing thoughts on it? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That is interesting. Yeah, and it's pretty well done. It's just Edward voices his feelings on it, and they don't really ever.
It doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, they don't really wrap it up or resolve it. But it is interesting, and I do agree that it is. While obviously the choice is hers, it is more complicated when you have it's complicated, and having a discussion about the fact that it is complicated and difficult and emotionally draining and emotionally that it affects his life in a very realistic way, that and he doesn't have a say in it. Not whether or not he should, the fact that he doesn't have a say in it does affect him, and is thus a thing that they would have to discuss as part of their relationship. So yeah, it's interesting. I really liked that the movie dropped the whole like number of genes thing. So Carlisle explains throughout the course of the book that he's been doing research on vampires and humans and werewolves and stuff, and has realized that humans have 23 genes, and vampires have.
Was it chromosomes?
Sorry, chromosomes. Yeah, chromosomes, not genes.
Pairs of 23 pairs. Yeah, and like Jacob has like 24 or 25 or something like that, and the werewolves have 24 or something. They do this whole, and I'm like, does that even make sense of how it would work? Probably not, because also chromosomal numbers, like there are certain like genetic disorders and stuff that are related to the number of chromosomes and having more. I don't know. I didn't do any research, and I don't know enough about it. I feel like neither did Stephenie Meyer.
That's what I mean, and that's why I feel like it was a good decision by the movie to just cut that out. That was
something that I felt like she just like threw in there because she thought it sounded interesting. Yeah. Because it, at least insofar as we've read, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't mean anything. No. So like, why'd you throw that in there, Steph?
And again, all it made me go is like, I don't think that's how chromosomes work. That seems wrong. Like, I don't know enough to tell you that you're wrong, but like, I feel like that's not correct. Yeah, I was like, that's a weird, okay.
Another amazing movie moment.
Oh, this is the best movie moment. The best movie moment, maybe in the whole series. Maybe, in my opinion.
Was Jacob's reaction to hearing the name Renesmee.
All of their reactions, but yes.
But the best part is Robert Pattinson laughing in the background as Jacob is reacting to this name, because I feel like it was Robert Pattinson and not him acting as Edward.
My favorite, this whole thing could be talked about forever, because not in the book, this scene plays out very similarly. She brings up the names and she says, I was thinking of Renesmee. Is that too weird? And I was like, as I read it, I was like, yes, it is too weird. Stephenie Meyer, you clearly know it's too weird because you asked us out loud if it was too weird. What are you doing? And then, the movie was like, absolutely, it's too weird. We're going to all laugh at it in this scene. Oh my God. And both the names, though, Edward Jacob. Yeah. I mean, she really put JK to shame in like bad naming of children characters. Like literally, like JK Rowling was like, boy, nobody can name children of main characters worse than me. And Stephenie Meyer was like, hold my Mormon beer and fucking right, non-alcoholic beer. My God.
You had this under the movie Nailed It. And I don't know if we got all of your thoughts here. Because you wanted me to ask you what you thought Renesmee was. Okay.
So here's the thing. And we're going to talk about this Renesmee even more later. I had heard the word Renesmee. I have never read. I have never watched these movies. Mm-hmm. I had heard. I think I saw a tweet that you or something about the whole Renesmee situation. That was like all I knew. And I was like, Renesmee? What? And it was also, I feel like that tweet was in relation to something to do with Jacob's love life. And now I didn't know what it meant yet. But it was after I had made my prediction about, I remember seeing this tweet sort of not in context and not knowing what Renesmee was. But it was after I had made my prediction about Renee coming and Jacob imprinting on her and marrying
God,
Renee.
I wish that's where Stephenie Meyer had taken this.
Right. But here's the thing. So after I had made that prediction and then I saw that, and I swear the tweet was something about in relation to Jacob's love life and about Renee, and I thought it was in relation to my prediction. Mm-hmm. So I was like, and I'm very familiar with the classic fanfic trope of combining the names of couples. And I was like, no joke, was like, boy, I didn't see that coming. You're telling me Carlisle dies and Phil dies and Renee and Esme get together? I thought Renesmee was absolutely the name, like the fan name.
Fanfic. Oh my God.
Not even fanfic, the actual in the book.
Oh my God.
I legitimately thought that I had spoiled that Renee and Esme ended up together in the end of this book. And I was like, what a twist, Stephenie Meyer. I didn't see that one coming at all. I thought my Renee Jacob one was a twist. That was a fucking twist. I was so confused. I was like, wow. And then when it ended up being the baby, I was like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. I don't know what's real anymore. Honestly, the Renee and Esme things makes more sense.
It does.
Oh my God.
It does.
Jesus Christ.
To quote an ancient meme that wasn't even funny at the time, still a better love story than Twilight.
Right? Oh my God. Yeah, I legit thought it was
That makes so much sense, though.
Yeah,
I thought
it
so
made
much
sense.
Yeah,
I thought it made sense. I was like, oh yeah, Renesmee. That's a stupid name. That would only possibly be the fan applied name for their pairing.
Yeah.
Is Renesmee.
It's their ship name.
Yeah, it's their ship name. And Stephenie Meyer made that come true. I don't know. I had no, was not expecting it to be the baby name. This is a slight change in the movie, but I kind of liked it. In the book and the movie, he plunges the syringe into her chest and injects the venom. But then in the book, he immediately starts like biting her. And in both, when I read the book and in the movie, at first when I read the book and he plunged the thing into her chest, I was like, boo, you're not going to bite her? That's the whole point of this whole thing. You can't sterilely inject your venom into her. Like, we've been building up to you turning into a vampire for 3.5 books, and you're not gonna bite her? Go fuck yourself. Like, I was so mad. And then he starts biting her, and I was like, all right, fine, I guess. But like in the book, the context of him biting her is it like helps spread it quicker or something. In the movie, they make a slight change that he does the injection, but then he thinks it's not working. And so then he starts like in panic mode, just like biting her.
Yeah.
Which made sense to me. Like kind of like if you're injecting it directly into her heart, like why is he also immediately biting her? Like it seems like you've already done the... But I liked the idea of him panicking, thinking it's not working, and then going, maybe you have to bite him. I don't know. Like I'll try to bite it. Like it kind of made sense. Yeah. I also just wish he would have just bit her. Like the plunger thing, the whole syringe thing, I just thought was dumb, and like they just wanted to do Pulp Fiction. Like it's just like, okay, why? Just have him bite her. That's the whole point of this whole thing, is him biting her and turning her into a vampire. Have you read any vampire story ever, Stephenie Meyer? Like what?
Have you read your previous 3 novels,
God,
Stephenie?
It's just, yeah, the plunging a syringe into the chest, I was not a fan of, but.
So this movie ends with a showdown between Sam's wolf pack and the Cullens, which is not in the book, at least insofar as we've read.
Yeah.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, I thought it made perfect sense.
Like, I can't remember if there's anything similar to this, like any direct correlation. I don't think there is.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. But it is a natural conclusion to the added tension in the movie.
Yeah.
And it gives us an action scene right at the end.
It gives us an action scene at the end. I also just think it makes sense because they find out Bella died. Like Jacob storms out of the house upset that Bella's dead, and Seth and the other wolves are in the woods, and they see this and they're like, oh, she died. And so they all realize now that Bella's dead, and that part of what was stopping them from attacking was they didn't want to kill Bella, was part of it. So they're like, oh, well, okay, now for sure the treaty's off. Bella's dead as a result of the vampire's action. So then they come to attack, basically, to come kill the baby. And yeah, it's a natural conclusion action scene. It's fine. It's not amazing in the movie, but it's kind of fun. We get to watch Jasper punch a werewolf in the face, which I thought was fun. I enjoyed that. And then also there's this moment where because they had to explain this is after Jacob imprints.
Right. He
comes out to fight on behalf of the Cullens again. And Edward realizes, reading his mind, oh, he imprinted on my baby. And he explains this to everybody. And Jacob's like, you kill her, you kill me. Whatever. It's all dumb. It's all dumb. It's all dumb. But if you're going to do dumb, do it, I guess.
It's all stupid.
The last thing a couple things I liked is I actually like in the movie they do this. It's a cheap way to do like a best of clip show in the movie, but I think it works. They do, as she's getting ready to turn into a vampire, she's essentially dying, and she has like her life, the classic life flashes before her eyes, and we get to see all of it, and we even go all the way back to her as like a baby and see Charlie and Renee together with her as like a baby, and it's this nice little moment. It's a fun fan service thing. But it also kind of makes sense in like that classic, like, life flashing before your eyes thing. And this is her last moment as a human. I think it works. I think it's kind of cool. And then I think the movie's decision to end on her eyes opening is the perfect, obvious ending.
Impactful.
Like, yeah.
It's also literally how that first section of the book ends. Yeah. With her opening her eyes.
Yeah. And it's a big impactful, you can see her eyes, they're red now. It's like, whoa, striking visual image. And a good cliffhanger. So yeah, makes perfect sense. All right. The movie nailed it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Edward and Bella, the night before their wedding, have a conversation about cold feet, which was like almost line for line in the movie. Bella also says, I'll be the one in white.
Yeah. I had this note too because I thought this felt like I remember when I read it, I was like, this feels like a memorable line. Edward says, meet you at the altar, as he jumps out the window, and she says, I'll be the one in white. And I was like, I feel like that's a line people would want in the movie, and they put it in the movie. So they also, at the wedding, Alice has her pin curls, which is a specific thing mentioned in the book that I figured people would care about.
Yeah. They also, I mentioned earlier that Charlie and Renee give Bella Grandma Swan's hair comb, which they have replaced the stones in to be real sapphires. Which is also mentioned in both the movie and the book. I also thought the movie did a good job with the ceremony space. They really nailed the canopy of flowers idea.
Yeah. They also don't do their own vows in the book or the movie, which is something I was really torn on as I read the book and realized they were doing like sort of just traditional vows. I was like, I both desperately needed and dreaded the idea of hearing Edward's vows. We actually kind of get a stand-in in the movie when he gives a toast, which is, I was like, okay, so we're still getting his vow. All right.
Sure. When Jacob and Bella are dancing at the wedding, Bella says they're going to have a real honeymoon.
As real as anybody.
Real.
Yeah.
Emphasis on real. And Jacob loses his mind.
Because we all know the only real way to have a honeymoon is to have sex. That's true. That's a true thing about people. It's not true, by the way.
Apparently, that's what makes it real.
Yeah. Because ace people don't exist in Stephenie Meyer's universe.
There are a lot of people that don't exist in Stephenie Meyer's universe.
Yeah, this is true. But yeah, the dialogue in that scene is like all identical.
Yeah,
the whole scene plays out like
much
identically. They dance. The conversation's all the same. All the lines are the same. And then, they freak out and fight. I think the movie is a little bit better in that it adds a "you'll kill her." Like Jacob yells like "you'll kill her" at Edward during that scene that is not in the book. That helps add a little bit of context as to why he's so upset. You can kind of suss it out that what the reason is, but I wasn't super is it? Because I didn't know if it was like just some weird like werewolf like aversion to humans and like some weird like bigotry almost type thing over like him like hurting her. You know what I mean? I wasn't sure exactly what it was.
I mean, I think for Jacob, it's all mixed up.
Yeah.
And like he wants Bella, so there's like jealousy,
right.
And also he hates vampires, so there's the bigotry thing.
Yeah.
And also Edward is very likely going to hurt Bella, so there's that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think adding a clarifying line was probably a good choice.
Yeah. I thought all the last scenes with the two scenes with Charlie and Renee, Bella's last interaction with them while she's still human, or pretty much identical as to how they are in the book. Slight tweaks on the dialogue, but pretty much identical. And they both worked really well. And Renee's worked better in the movie, I think, than it did in the book because we've had a few more interactions with her that we've seen in the movies versus in the book.
As Edward and Bella are driving away from the reception, they hear a sad wolf howl in the night.
Yeah. Yes, they do. That's right. The movie nails the awkward once they get to the honeymoon suite. These two people who've never had, they're now married and they're going to have sex maybe for the first time, and like the awkward tension. It's all very uncomfortable, but it was read uncomfortable as well. And like Bella like brushing her teeth and shaving her legs a bunch of times and stuff. It all plays out similarly awkwardly in the book and the movie. I thought the movie captured it pretty well. And in particular line where she's like, "Don't be a coward," and she like goes out to like get in the water with them. And it's if this scene were happening in a different franchise, it would be cute and fun potentially.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, where it's like this lead up to like it's been 4 books of them together and they had to get married and there's all these weird puritanical values and stuff placed on it, and we know all those sort of weird potential outcomes of it. It makes it not as cute as it should be. Like it should, like it should play out like a more fun like. Remember being a teenager, or remember being young and not knowing how to initiate sex with your partner, and how that was awkward. But it's like they're married, and
this is up on an even higher pedestal than it would be if they were both just humans, like 2 normal humans, bopping along.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is all like the stakes are weirdly high, and it's not fun, you guys.
It's not fun in the way the movie feels like it is, even though it plays out. Yeah, it's weird. It's like looking at it through. I don't know. It's strange.
The movie nails Alice packing Bella a suitcase full of lingerie.
Yeah, an entire suitcase full of lingerie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some of it was really tame.
Most of it is all just like
There was one black thing that she put on that just looked like a club dress.
Yeah. Like,
I was like, is that lingerie?
I guess. I mean, yeah, it's lingerie, but yeah, none of it's particularly like crazy.
Yeah.
It's just like lingerie. It's like, all right. And their moonlight swim, it's the thing that they do in the book where they go out at night when the first night they get there and they get naked and stand in the ocean together. In the movie, it looks terrible.
Yeah, it's not great.
Some of it looks okay, but then other close-up shots look like it's there's like this weird hard dividing line in the water between what is like CG and what it. I don't know what was something about the lighting, or I don't know if it was real and they were greens or they were green screened in. I had such a hard time figuring out why it looked so bad, and I'm still not sure, but it didn't look good. It didn't look like they were just filmed competently standing in the ocean at night. It looked like a whole hodgepodge of weird techniques.
Were they maybe like in a pool and the ocean stretching out into the horizon was green screen?
That's my guess, is that it's a composited shot of them in like a soundstage water thing or something. But it just, I don't know why it was so hard to just shoot them in the ocean. Like they were at the ocean, like they were in. They went to this island, like very clearly, like we see them.
They filmed somewhere tropical-ish.
Yeah, and I remember reading in the prequel note, I don't know if I wrote it down, but they did go and film for several weeks at like some tropical location. It's like, was it that hard to take a camera out to the ocean and just shoot them standing in the ocean? Maybe it was some sort of weird, like...
Maybe there were sharks.
Yeah, maybe it was some sort of weird, like, insurance thing. I have no idea, but it was like, it looked terrible.
I guess they probably would be expensive to insure.
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, shark attacks or drowning.
Or just like, because it's nighttime and worried about them just like getting a riptide or something. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. I just thought it doesn't look good. And for such like a sort of iconic, like supposed to be really cinematic, like beautiful moment, it looks terrible.
Edward breaking the headboard, that's from the book. The room being covered in feathers because he bit the pillows.
Yeah, we talked about this stuff earlier, and all the feathers everywhere. And then this is also in the book and the movie, and it's equally cringe in both. Is after the first time they have sex, Edward is like, no more sex. And so Bella just tries to seduce him a bunch, and culminating in one night, she wakes up from having a sex dream.
Yep.
And just like sobs and guilt trips Edward into fucking her.
Yeah, it's real weird.
It's real weird.
It's real weird.
Some real repressed religious...
some stuff that Stephenie should probably work out.
Some real repressed religious sort of guilt going on there that is manifesting in this scene. And but they do ultimately have sex again, and then they're fine at it now, and he doesn't hurt her this time, and they can just have sex.
Because she gets on top.
True. It seemed obvious from the beginning.
It seemed very obvious. I was like, she should just be on top. She should
definitely be on top, because then you won't crush her pelvis.
Yeah.
Like with your then vampire
she's in control.
Yeah.
And it'll all be fine.
It'll be fine. And it is fine. And that's definitely the scene that they had to reshoot because Kristen Stewart was thrusting too much. So
the movie nailed, we talked a little bit about her, but the housekeeper who's suspicious of Edward because of the native legends.
And it is a bit of a trope. Like I felt like it's a bit of a like, the Hispanic woman who knows things, and it's like
the woman of color who knows things. The
magical woman of color who knows things. Yeah, it felt like it's one of those. Like,
it's very tropey.
It's very tropey, and it's like definitely problematic in some ways. But yeah, it's in both of them. She makes fries chicken because she wakes up super hungry.
Casually fries herself some chicken.
Yeah. This is the first time we see Bella cook in the movies, though.
True.
I didn't even think about that. This is the first time we see her actually cook something. But it's bad or whatever, or she thinks it's bad.
Yeah.
And
she barfs it up like immediately. And then she realizes that she's pregnant, and she has the teeniest little pooch in her belly, which
it's like not noticeable.
On Kristen Stewart, it's literally just like everyone with a uterus has that little pooch. Like if you have a uterus, you're never going to get your stomach like completely flat.
Yeah.
Because that little pooch literally is your uterus.
Yeah.
So take note. If you have a uterus and you're wondering why you can't get your stomach, that's why. It's your anatomy. You're welcome. But that's literally what it is on Kristen Stewart. But we are meant to believe that she has a little baby bump.
And she's, and I noticed it in the beginning of this movie, she's thinner in this movie than any of the previous two. And I don't know, I don't know if that was a choice, because it wouldn't surprise me if that was a choice for later, like when she becomes pregnant,
when they
gets
have to make her look like super skeletal, and
if maybe she got down as thin as she could
she
healthily or something.
She is incredibly thin.
Yeah, especially, and she's thin in the first movies, but comparatively, like she's
very
like
bony.
model thin in this one.
Yes. So she notices her little alleged baby bump, and then feels something move, and Alice calls them because something has gone wrong.
And Edward's reaction during that whole phone call is like identical to what it is in the book. Like he just doesn't move, he doesn't react, he doesn't say anything until all of a sudden he just starts going and he picks up and starts talking to Carlisle. But I thought, it plays out pretty much identically.
Yeah.
And I thought, speaking of Bella looking like a skeleton, that is how it's described in the book. You know, she's like just completely emaciated. And I thought the movie did a really good job of that. I mean, it's horrifying to look at a lot. Like it's very, but yeah, she does look. And I think part of that is because she did, and maybe it was on purpose for this, lose a fair amount of weight before this movie or whatever. And then, they add some effects on top of that, probably prosthetics and CG and stuff. And she looks,
And there's a lot of like shading going on to make her look like her bones are popping out even more.
Yeah, and then there are some shots are like full on prosthetics, like when she's standing in front of the mirror that one time you see like her shoulders and stuff. That's just like a prop body or something like that. But yeah, it's all they capture that pretty well, and it's upsetting. It's not doesn't look good.
The movie gets to it slightly differently than the book does, but Bella does end up calling Rosalie.
Yeah, she does. She calls her up and it's like,
I need you to help me birth this demon child.
And they did nail Rosalie's obnoxious overprotectiveness. Like she's just completely obnoxious the whole time. She like insists everybody calls it a baby instead of a fetus. They're all, and like anytime anybody calls anything other than a baby, she's like, baby, it's a baby. Yeah. Ugh.
Yup. I talked about the movie pretty much nails Edward asking Jacob to try and talk some sense into Bella.
The baby breaks her bones and stuff. The fetus is like cracking her bones, which is
she's like cracking ribs and
they think maybe her pelvis cracked at some point, and it does break her spine during the birthing scene, which is gnarly. And it takes, we talked about this earlier, it takes so long.
Oh, it takes them so long.
This is so obvious.
It's so obvious.
The baby needs to drink blood.
Yeah.
The baby needs blood.
It's half vampire. Of course it needs blood, you guys.
They let Bella sit and
she's starving to death down
she's
to
wasting skin and away. Bones. And then Jacob's like, stupid blood sucking vampires, and they're like, what did you say? Wait, do we drink blood? Like I'm like, wait, what? It took literally Jacob. Okay, great. Carlisle, you didn't consider maybe the half vampire baby might need some blood?
He calls himself a doctor.
Right? I was like, this is okay. But it's the same in the movie and the book. It takes Jacob just thinking about it for them to come up with that.
And so then the scene where Edward realizes that he can hear the baby's thoughts is pretty much the same.
Yeah. We talked about the venom injecting venom into her heart. I'm not a big fan of it, but it was in the book. So my final note is the imprinting scene. It plays out the same. Jacob's coming in to kill Renesmee, and he's walking up, and then, she turns around and he sees the baby's face. And oh my God, I laughed out. And now I had heard tale of there being a CG baby that looked terrible. I'd never seen it, but I had heard tell of this abomination.
It's been memed.
Yeah. And it lived up to it. I laughed out loud at the moment where he sees the baby's face, and it's this weird CG baby face. And he falls, he imprints, and we get this like voiceover of
drops to his knees.
Yeah. It's so dumb and terrible in the movie, but it's a dumb, terrible thing.
Yeah.
It's a dumb, terrible decision in the book. So it
all
deserves.
terrible.
It's all terrible, and it deserves such a dumb. The baby shouldn't have been pretty. It should have been a weird, ugly CG baby. It would have been weird if it was like somehow a pretty. Or a normal human face baby. None of it would have been good, no matter what. Making it a weird, memeable alien like plastic CG abomination is exactly what this scene deserved. So,
okay, Jacob imprinting on the baby. Can we just go ahead and talk about this real quick, or do you want to talk about it later?
Did we have it later? I mean, we can talk about it now. I didn't have any.
Let's just talk about it now, because the thing that is so hilarious to me is that Stephenie Meyer breaks a fucking sweat writing, trying to convince us that it's actually not weird.
Guys,
that you
I
can
promise
imprint
it's actually
on
not weird.
On a child. She's like, guys, it's actually fine. It's not weird at all.
Guys, it's actually not pedophilia, it's a phebophilia, and it's totally natural.
It's not weird. It's not weird because they don't feel that way, and they'll just be like whatever she needs at that time. It's actually not weird.
Guys, it's
but
not
guess
weird.
what?
It's weird.
It's still weird.
It's still weird.
It's
no
not
way.
okay.
There's no way to do it. There's no way. It's just such an insane decision. It's
Yeah.
such an insane decision. It's just such a weird, and I have no idea I can't even speculate if it comes from because there's Mormonism, there's traditionally certain sects of Mormonism. There was there were with the polygamy and stuff, there were like younger, and I no idea if it comes anywhere from that at all. Like I have no idea if that's like anything to do with if there's any sort of background with that and why she made this decision. No idea. But it is such a weird decision that it feels like there has to be some sort of explanation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there has to be, because why would you ever do it?
And she knows that it's weird.
Yeah.
She knows.
She
goes to such great lengths trying to convince us that it's actually not weird at all.
I promise, guys.
But
it's not weird.
But it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what, it's so wild to me. And which is what makes me think that there has to be some reason.
Yeah.
Like some more deep-seated
like
reason.
There's something there.
Yeah.
I just don't know what. And I don't know if I want to know what.
No, I don't know, but it's wild. It's such a wild choice. It's such a wild, because you can still do the imprinting thing, which is already weird anyways.
Yeah.
And just make it with other adults. It's such a no-brainer. Like I don't.
Your idea about Renee.
Yeah.
Perfectly valid.
Right.
Would have accomplished basically the same thing.
Renee's a hottie. Go get her, Jacob. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't. It's so dumb. Yeah. So dumb. All right, that was it for the movie Nailed It. It's time for Bryan Predicts the Twilight Saga.
It's gonna happen, Edward. I've seen it.
Everyone's favorite new segment.
This is my last one.
Yeah.
I guess. We'll have my
We'll have the follow-up.
In
but part two. But.
And these aren't as good this time. And one of them I think I had to change because I'll have to see. Because I made my second predict. We're gonna go over my original predictions here first. So. Predictions for Breaking Dawn Part 1. First one, Bella finally becomes a vampire and they finally have sex. This will be the end of movie 1. I'm still holding out hope for him turning her as they climax during the first time having sex, but not holding out too much hope. I still don't know why that wasn't what happened, but whatever. I bet that they have sex and then sometime after something goes awry and Edward has to turn her to save her. So yeah, I basically got this one right.
Basically,
kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do have sex. Something does go wrong, and he does have to turn her as a result. So there you go. And it was the end of the first movie. My second prediction was that Sam would die, and Jacob has to assume leadership of the pack. And this is where I mentioned there's a whole plot line that's dropped from Eclipse, where Jacob is second in command, or it's dropped from the movie of Eclipse, where Jacob's second in command, but he should be the alpha, but he didn't want it. Blah blah blah. And I'm thinking someone important had to die eventually. Again, no one dies if you don't count Bella, because she comes back to life.
Right.
But I mean, yeah. So Sam doesn't die, but Jacob does become the alpha of his own pack. So half
Yeah,
points,
kind of half
kind
right
of
there.
I am still amazed that nobody important has died, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not at all. It's weird.
Still have like
I know
like 400 pages of book.
I know we have and I'm sure somebody will eventually. But and then my last prediction was about the Renesmee, my Renesmee prediction, my completely different, or not Renesmee, sorry, my Genesmee, I don't know, whatever, that Jacob and Renesmee would, or no, Jacob and Renee would end up together, and I was close, and yet, oh, so far. Yeah, so far.
So I want to ask you, how much of Jacob imprinting on the baby was spoiled for you ahead of reading? Like, I want to know if that was something that was spoiled by like cultural osmosis, or if you were...
It was spoiled before I got to that point in the book, but it was not spoiled before I wrote these predictions.
Okay.
I had seen maybe even a meme you posted or something in between starting to read this and getting to the point where that happens. I had it spoiled. But before that, I had not. I had no idea.
Okay.
So it was a surprise in that regard. Like during the reading of this book, it did surprise me, and I was like, "What, really?" But I did find out before I got to that point in the book. But I didn't know when I wrote this prediction originally.
See, because me, like, rereading this book, the first half, knowing that Bella gets pregnant, I was like every time she has a dream about a baby, I was like, oh, Stephenie just out here giving away the whole plot every single time Bella dreams.
I did also pick up a lot of hints because it got spoiled like right after I started this. I saw a tweet or something about it. So it was spoiled pretty early in me reading this, and I did catch a fair amount of hints in the book as to the potential what was going to happen. Yeah. Like all the lead up to about all the talk about imprinting.
Yeah.
And
yes, all of the stuff with Jacob is breadcrumbed very heavily as well.
Yeah, and there's even stuff
like there is one point where he says to Bella, like, I'll never be part of your family. And I was like, huh.
There was something else even that Jacob was talking about that because I knew what it was, I was like, oh. And I swear it had to do with him talking about, like, I don't remember because I didn't write it down, but there was something about his describing like his how he's drawn to Bella or something, or there was something that felt very much like and it was after she was pregnant, that felt very much like,
because he talks about how like he keeps going back to like that the draw is so strong and like he wants to leave but he like can't leave. Yeah, there was something I was just like, oh, okay, and like again, because since I knew at that point. But it wasn't. If I may take you back for a moment to 2008. Okay. When I read this. Yeah. I got this book probably the day it came out, if not very shortly after. And I read this book. I stayed up all night reading this book. Because as we've discussed, I was a big fan. And up till this point, really just loving everything that was going on. So I stayed up all night reading this book. And the pregnancy thing, I was like, okay, I actually did kind of see that coming, but we can talk about that at another point. Because I have something that I'm going to post online for you guys. Okay. I was like, I don't love it, but sure, whatever, fine. But when he imprinted on that baby, picture me, 18 years old, sitting up all night reading this book. It's probably like 2 a.m. by the time I get to that point. And I'm reading this, and I just went, what the fuck? So loudly that I was concerned I had woken up my mom.
Yeah. Was that the first time fandom disappointed you? Like that? Was that the first memory you have of being crushed by a property you loved?
You know, it might be.
Yeah. It's bad. It's not good.
It's not good. Yeah,
Not good.
it's not good.
All right, I have a few more predictions for Breaking Dawn Part 2. Oh, do I need to? This is the one I think I might need to change. So here's my first prediction. I wrote this before Part 1, before I read. So here we go. After the pack finds out about the Volturi, that they're coming for Bella, that sort of thing, this sparks a big conflict between the Cullens and the pack, resulting in a brief fight where one of the Cullens and one of the pack is irrevocably injured. This strains their tenuous relationship, and we're worried the Cullens will have to face the Volturi alone. Ultimately, the pack shows up to help save the day. So there is this tension. Mm-hmm. So I guess this still kind of works. And we even had the fight in the movie.
Yeah.
Nobody was hurt necessarily. But we still have that tension, but it's also complicated now by the fact that like there's two packs kind of like what I would change this to now, potentially. This isn't a prediction though. This is just what I think. Well, I guess it is a prediction, but based on what happened after this part 1, it would be my guess is that we're going to get wolves on both sides. But maybe not. Like potentially, it would be that like Jacob and his pack will fight on the side of the Cullens and them versus the Volturi and
Oh, you think Sam's pack might
side with the Volturi?
That's really interesting.
That would be my different prediction after this one, so that we can have wolves and vampires fighting each other on both sides. You get that way. So, second prediction: Jasper dies. He's lived a long, super tortured existence, living with the guilt of not only being a Confederate soldier, but also murdering all those newborns for the Southern Vampire Wars. He needs to go. This is also, if you remember, my wishes for Breaking Dawn, which I'll come back to those after Part 2, was that since I thought Phil was going to die and Jasper's going to die. No. Yes? I don't remember. Somehow I had Alice ending up with Renee? No. Who did I have Alice ending up with?
I feel like it was Renee, and you were maybe predicting that they were gonna go like open a bakery or something.
That was what it was, yeah. But I don't remember why or how. It doesn't matter. We'll get back to that eventually. But Jasper dies. That's my prediction. Somebody has to die. Somebody that matters has to die eventually. I feel like. Bella and Jacob, final prediction for Breaking Dawn Part 2. This is the end of the series prediction. Bella and Jacob eventually do go to Dartmouth.
Bella and Edward?
Yes, sorry. Edward. Why did I write? Yeah. Bella and Edward do eventually go to Dartmouth. Bella majors in literature with a focus on British modernism, and Edward majors in musical theory. They are that obnoxious college couple. No one likes them. The end.
I did read some fanfic that was like that.
I can imagine. Yeah. They go to Dartmouth and get pretentious majors, and they're obnoxious and nobody likes them.
Read a lot of fanfic where Bella and Alice were roommates.
Yeah, where's she going to school? We don't ever know what she's up to.
Presumably also Dartmouth, but who knows?
I mean, hopefully. All right. We got a few odds and ends, and then we'll get to the final verdict.
All right. So my first note on this series, and this is not really a spoiler, but I guess kind of a spoiler, since as far as we've read, we haven't actually interacted with vampire Bella yet.
Yeah.
But I would like to know why Bella is not granted prophetic powers like Alice, as she has pretty prophetic dreams all the freaking time.
That is a good question, because she definitely does.
Yeah. Like, clearly she has that, the predisposition to that, Stephenie.
So she doesn't get that. I would be interested to see if she gets any powers, like any specific powers.
We'll see.
We'll see. I don't know. I'm not there yet. She's still learning how to hear things, so she's still seeing in crystal 4K. So, Edward says that he doesn't ask Charlie's permission for Bella's hand in marriage because he wants to respect Bella's choice in the matter. I was like, all right.
Okay, sure.
In this book full of like the most puritanical values ever, all of a sudden we're like, haha, I'm not going to ask your dad for your hand in marriage because we're progressive like that. Also, I won't fuck you until we're married. Like, come on. It's stupid.
I mentioned in the prequel to this episode that on the morning of her wedding, Bella gets up and makes pancakes for Charlie.
Yeah.
Also, go check this out. I've been reading the hardback version. This is on page 39. She makes him pancakes. And then on the same page, what were your editors doing, Stephenie Meyer? On the same page, Scarlet's Charlie later scowls into his cereal bowl.
He does. It's part of a balanced breakfast, Katie. You've seen the commercials.
Pancakes and cereal.
Yeah, you got pancakes, cereal, fruit, a glass of orange juice, and bacon and eggs. It's part of a balanced breakfast. This chapter was sponsored by
General Mills.
General Mills, yeah. So when they get to the island, speaking of food, they get to the island and Edward is like cooking eggs all the time for her. And then specifically, he makes her like a very good omelet, apparently. And this is one of those little details that just really, really bothered me because the idea is that Edward has lost the ability. We've talked about this in the Midnight Sun episode and other things. Edward has lost the ability of knowing how to act around humans. That's why he's such a weirdo around Bella. It's like he doesn't remember how to act around humans, and he doesn't know how to. He's like doesn't know what to do because he can read people's minds, and he's forgotten how to like be a normal person. But he knows how to cook a 3-egg omelet to perfection. Omelets are fucking hard. I cook them all the time. I still fuck them up most. I didn't buy it that he can. He doesn't cook. Who does he cook for?
Okay. So, when we talked about Midnight Sun, we also talked about how Stephenie Meyer did a lot of retroactive question answering.
Yeah.
And this question is answered in Midnight Sun. He, at one point, like right around when he starts hanging out with Bella, and he's like, oh, I have to think about all of her needs as a human.
Yeah.
I have to remember that she has to like eat and sleep and stuff.
Yeah.
And he thinks to himself, oh, I'll learn to cook. And then I'm like better for her because I can cook for her.
Fair enough.
So,
okay.
Question answered.
Question asked and answered. Because that was really annoying to me. I was like, okay, he forgets how to be a human, but he can still cook. Okay, great. Fantastic.
Here's a weird thing about Bella that's never been discussed. She calls both of her parents mom and dad, but she thinks of them and like outside of their presence always refers to them as Charlie and Renee. Now, we cover that in Twilight because she tells us in Twilight, while we're in her perspective, that she hasn't spent like a ton of time with Charlie, so she doesn't really think of him as like dad.
Yeah.
But she does the exact same thing with Renee, and it's never acknowledged.
Yeah, that is strange. Yeah, she doesn't just say mom in her head.
Yeah,
like when we're
because like
it.
when I am thinking of my mom, I don't think her name.
Yeah,
I think
same.
mom.
Yeah, same with my parents. Yeah, I just think of my parents like mom and dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is very strange.
And it's weird that we're given a reason for Charlie, but not Renee.
Yeah. We could have probably put this in better in the book, but there's a sweet book cover call out in the movie.
God.
They while they're on their honeymoon, they play chess. It's one of the things they do when they're not having sex because they can't do that because, you know, they play chess, and the chess set it's the chess set from the cover of Breaking Dawn with the red chess pieces.
Yes, it is.
And I was like, I see what you did there, movie. They did the apple. They got to keep doing them. They've done all of them. I don't remember about the eclipse one.
I don't think they did a ribbon.
But they did that
anything.
in the beginning. It's funny because they did that in the beginning of New Moon. There's that shot of the red scarf blowing through the air, like because it's a flash forward from my memory, or it's like a flag or something.
Oh yeah.
There's a flash forward to the Italian
when
city at the end.
Yeah.
And there's like a red flag or scarf or something like blowing through the air that's reminiscent of the eclipse cover. But the flower that it's reminiscent of. There's a moment in New Moon where after she gets all the cut up in the blood,
with like the gauze.
He's the gauze, the bloody gauze. He puts it in a bowl, and it looks kind of similar to the flower.
And that's funny too, because New Moon was the only one that I didn't find any like fun facts explaining the story behind the cover image for. Yeah, it's just like a cool red and white flower.
Yeah. But yeah, so I figured, I guess after they made the apple canon, they're like, we got to make the rest of this stuff canon. They're playing chess with a red chessboard.
Keep the dream alive.
Yeah.
You know what is super bogus? In neither the book or the movie do we get any kind of bachelorette party for Bella.
Yeah.
There's mention of Edward getting a bachelor party.
Which is just them hunting.
But still.
Yeah.
I demand an Alice planned bachelorette party.
That would have been, they were missing out there.
Yeah.
Would have been a shindig. For sure. So this is a question I had more so watching the movie, but also while the book, and maybe it's addressed and I just never paid attention. Why don't they because Carlisle is able to acquire human blood from the blood bank for Bella.
Like ethically and legally.
Just like buys it or whatever.
Yeah.
And they have, we know, all the money. Like they're infinitely rich. Why don't they just buy human blood and drink that? Is it because they're worried they'll eat people if they maybe. It's like a cold turkey thing, like if they're
maybe. I feel like there's possibly a couple explanations here. One, I could see Carlisle having some kind of hang up on we're taking blood from people who need it.
Right.
Also, I don't know that Stephenie Meyer would think to do this, but I could see in other vampire properties where there could be a thing about it doesn't satisfy their primal animal urge to go out and hunt,
kill something, in order for it to count or whatever. Yeah. And so killing an animal still counts or whatever. Yeah, I could see that. I think what you're saying about Carlisle, but I also think when they started doing this was at a time where it wouldn't be easy.
Yeah.
Because they started centuries ago.
Right.
Where they could hunt animals, but they couldn't easily get, donated blood. And there is obviously, very famously, there's routinely giant shortages of blood. It's not like it's super plentiful all the time. I'm just saying, I was just thinking because they're so rich and stuff that it wouldn't be
they could easily buy blood.
But at this point, they've been doing the animal thing so long and it works, you might as well, there's no reason not to.
Of course, if we keep endangering and extincting all of the big predators, what are they going to do?
Well, and then, that's the other thing, though, is I think arguably, ethically, unless it's taking blood from people who need it for other things.
Right.
Drinking human donated blood would be more ethical than hunting and killing animals, right? Because ethically, I think ethically, this is a whole different discussion. Ethically, I think veganism is probably correct. I think that's probably the right way. Ethically, if you're gonna have a consistent moral ethical stance, probably should be vegan. Again, that's a whole other discussion for another. I'm not a vegan, so I'm clearly not. I'm not even a vegetarian, but. I think that's the thing I'm failing at more than it's I can justify my non-vegan lifestyle. That being said, so I think it's arguable that ethically it would actually be more moral for them to drink donated blood than to hunt and kill animals for their blood. I don't know, just saying. Anyways, it's interesting. It's an interesting thought.
It's interesting. I do wonder if they have a negative impact on animal populations.
Yeah. Well, but they kill predators and prey in equal parts, I feel because they kill deer sometimes too, but they also kill
but there's a lot of deer and there's not that many mountain lions and grizzly bears.
Yeah. It must be that they have to hunt them and kill them because they could just grow. They could just have a farm.
They're rich,
true. You know what I mean?
That's true. They could just raise livestock.
So clearly there must be some something in the hunting and and again, that's never touched on, but maybe there must be some sort of magic in that makes it work or something. Because they could just raise livestock.
I see all the holes in your plot, Stephenie.
But also, to be fair, I think the hunting and getting them, that's more ethical than raising livestock. So I don't fucking know. It gets more and more complicated. Me and Carlisle need to sit down and hash this out. Carlisle would be really into having a really deep ethical conversation about the merits of drinking donated blood versus hunting animals versus raising livestock. He would be really into that. First, he's rich enough. We can synthesize proteins that are very. Oof, there's so many. I want a 3-hour podcast where Carlisle sits down and discusses the ethics of being a vegan vampire and all the ways because there's no way he hasn't thought through it every which way to Sunday. Like he's thought through it all. So I want to pick his brain on it.
So I went on a journey during the wedding scene of this movie because the song that plays as Bella is walking down the aisle. It's by the band Sleeping at Last. It's Turning Page. Sleeping at Last. And I love that song. And I had no idea that it was featured in this movie. And I was actually going to suggest that to you as our first dance. But now I feel like we can't have it. Not just because she walks down the aisle to it, but then later on they have sex to it. If it was just her walking down the aisle, I might be like, okay. But then they have sex to it.
I think that's an even better reason to have it as our first dance song, personally. But
it's also a little long, but
that's amazing. That's hilarious. They also, my last note is that they discussed that they don't know the anatomy of the fetus because the ultrasound won't go through the placenta or whatever. It's it's because it's a vampire. It's got like stone or something.
It has its own like shell casing.
Yeah. So they can't see with an ultrasound to see what the anatomy of the fetus is. And it's just, I went off on a tangent of like, well, I wonder how a vampire would do like a gender reveal party. Do you think they'd burn down the entire Washington coast if they?
Carlisle would feel very bad about it.
Yes, they would. Yeah.
They would have to run around and put out the fire themselves.
Yeah.
To appease their guilt.
You know, the way we kill gender reveal parties is we call them what they actually are, which is anatomy reveal parties. And then everybody's like, that's a stupid name. And this is stupid. Why are we doing this? And then they die, I feel like.
Yeah.
We just got to get pushed. It's like, oh, you're having an anatomy reveal party? And they're like, what? No? Yeah, you are. You clearly don't know what the fucking gender of your baby is. You're having a does it have a penis party. That's what you're doing.
They get the baby a little trench coat.
Why? Wait, why a trench coat?
Because it's a flasher.
Right, okay. I don't know. I got the flasher thing and it made me laugh, but then I didn't realize how that related to vampires because I was talking about the vampire, how they would do an anatomy reveal party.
I don't know. They would have to you would have to figure out a way to dye the blood of an animal. And then
bite it and it sprays blood.
It sprays pink or blue blood.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. That would be something like that. That would probably be the way to do it.
I mean, that's the analog to cutting a cake and it's full of blue M&Ms or some shit, right?
Yeah. Also, just hashtag canceled gender reveal parties.
Yeah.
It's fucking dumb. Gender's a construct. All right. Katie, do you have any other?
I have a couple more things. One thing that I just want to mention, because I've noticed that this is something that happens in every Twilight movie, is that whenever we enter a scene in the Collins house, they're always just posed about the room like they're in an Austen movie.
Yes.
They're just they're posed behind the couches and perched on chairs. As though we have just walked into a scene in Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah. They really, it's pretty great. I do like that. I do appreciate that. That's fun. I'm a fan of that.
My last thing here, could we not have just made this a use protection no matter what moral?
This seems like the
I
obvious
feel
moral.
like that should be the moral. Like, they thought they were safe and they didn't need to use protection, but turns out you actually should always use a condom.
Who's rewriting the woke version of this? I want that. I want woke Twilight. I want Twilight where the message is that, use protection, but then they didn't, so then she just gets an abortion and it's fine and everything's fine. And then you can write in my thing with Renee.
Yes.
Like it's just all, and then Jacob can imprint on Renee and we can just have, this can all be fine. We can make it all fine. I don't. Use protection. It seems obvious, but it's definitely, it's not. Conservative religious background. That ain't the answer. That ain't it, chief, as the kids say.
Are the kids still saying that?
I have no idea.
I feel like when I start saying something, it probably means the kids aren't saying it anymore.
No. Yeah, definitely not. No. Yeah. All right, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
The book does a couple things fine. The book does a better job with Stephenie Meyer's lore, especially in regard to the wolves and how their pack mechanics work. The book does a better job in general showing Jacob coming around to some of the Cullens, particularly the beginnings of his friendship with Edward and the soft spot that he gets for Esme. The book also tackles the body horror in a much better way. The movie does us the major service in not making us suffer through Jacob's fucked up perspective, including his aforementioned misogyny and his self-hate, which is much more violent and externally aimed than Edward's is. Like, I would honestly rather read this entire series from Edward's perspective than from Jacob's.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Which is what you're getting, so hey.
Better not. The movie also gets rid of some of the yikesy stuff, like Jacob making gay jokes, and Leah wondering if she's not female enough. However, the movie isn't able to fully get away from Stephenie's pro-birth crusade, and we still end up with a lot of gross and gross-out moments. I want to do a more succinct sum-up of how I feel about these adaptations as a whole, in comparison to the book after we've watched part 2, because I feel like that's a more fair way to do it. Mm-hmm. But for now, here's what I'll end with. I enjoyed watching the movie more than I enjoyed reading the book. So for this time, I'm going to give it to the movie.
I'm just going to co-sign this. I think I'll also have more to say after part 2, but the first half of this book was just not good.
Yeah.
It's a mess of weird fanfic and fan service mixed with pacing issues and problematic themes. The movie is able to cut out a lot of the worst stuff, which makes it slightly more enjoyable. And there's also some silly, like, self-aware stuff that is just funny. Like this scene with the Renesmee name reveal scene, completely self-aware, completely taking the piss, and very funny as a result of it. Apart from the stuff the movie cuts out, it's basically 1-to-1 of the book. Like,
there's a lot of stuff that's just the same.
It's just the same. And so the book's bad. The movie is also bad, but a little less bad. So the movie wins, I guess. Movie's better.
The winner by default. The best way to win.
Yeah. All right. That's it for our Breaking Dawn Part 1 episode. First things first, you can do us a giant favor. Head over to patreon.com/asfilmislit. Support us for $2, $5, $15 a month. Get access to all kinds of stuff. For $5 a month and up, you get access to our Midnight Sun review, where Katie talks about Midnight Sun for an hour and a half. If you enjoyed our Twilight episodes, go check that out. It was a lot of fun. You can also do us a giant favor by going to iTunes, Stitcher, whatever, giving us a 5-star review there. Helps out a lot. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, we're not... there's no prequel episode. There is a prequel episode. Let me explain this properly. Next Wednesday, a week from when you're listening to this, if you're listening to it the day it comes out, we are doing Breaking Dawn Part 2.
Yes.
So there's not a 2-week gap.
Yes. But we still wanted to do a little mini episode. We want to get some feedback from you guys on how you feel about the Part 1 movie.
And then we're going to preview the movie Part 2.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So we're going to have a little short,
Like
probably
a
little bit
little
shorter.
mini-sode.
It's still a prequel episode. It's just going to be potentially a little bit shorter. No learning things.
We
no
won't
book
have a
preview.
learning things. We won't have a book preview.
So yeah.
And depending on how much feedback we get, I think it'll
be a little bit
difference on
shorter,
how
but
long
it'll
it
come
is.
out this weekend sometime.
Yeah.
We're not sure when, probably Saturday or Sunday, in that ballpark. And that'll be the prequel for Part 2, but then Part 2 will be out next week. So that's that.
And also, if you're listening and if you want to give us feedback, if you're somebody who usually does give us feedback on our episodes, and if you want to weigh in on Part 1,
Oh yeah, you need to do it like Friday.
please get your thoughts out there quickly so that we can get it into the episode.
The post will be up very quick after this comes out, and we're either recording Friday or Saturday, so before that.
I'll probably put the posts up like Thursday.
Yeah,
so.
try to get your comments in by Friday sometime, if you can, if you want to get your feedback heard on the prequel episode. So there you go. That's it. That's everything. We won't worry about what's after Twilight until next week. So we'll do that then. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary, everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
keep being awesome.